Ancient gods in the sky, open up my third eye. Take a look, it's in the book, the Occult Book Club. They will go anywhere, with texts so rare and knowledge to share. The Occult Book Club. They will say anything, from pages of old and secrets untold. The Occult Book Club. The Occult Book Club. The Occult Book Club.
Yo, here we are. It's another episode of the Occult Book Club, and we're going to be jumping into, I think, one of my favorite philosophers of all time, probably secured by our Voyage to Cartesius book. If you haven't checked that episode out yet, you should probably check that out. Maybe we'll remember to put a link to it in the description or something, but we're going to be talking about Rene Descartes, and specifically, it's kind of like a biography, but this book also promises to drop some major knowledge. It's called Descartes' Secret Notebook, and there really was a secret notebook that was written in code, and it was lost in like a boat capsizing. It turned into sunken treasure, and then people went out finding it, and they only found certain pages and how to dry them out, and it almost sounds like people died over this information. And when I got to the end, and they do tell you exactly what the secret was, I was like, oh, I knew that.
Yeah, like the everything that they've all been on to since like the beginning, right? The concept of the Platonic solids has always interested me for a long time, and the fact that they saw it as having some sort of divine power, if you will, right? Because they were obsessed with turning everything into shapes. So when I think this is the book that I found, am I lagging a lot? You see that?
A little bit.
It's the deep state, bro. Hold on.
They don't want us to reveal what's in the secret notebook.
Yo, but Descartes had the Riz, right? He was like rizzing the queen bitches left and right, dude.
Well, dude, there's a trend that I noticed almost immediately, and now I can't shake this. Originally, it was kind of a joke, but we were talking about how Manly Palmer Hall, his real secret was just finding a bunch of sugar mamas, because ultimately, if you're alive, hell, even in 2025, you can't really dedicate your entire life to reading old ancient manuscripts and Platonic solids and just doing math all day unless you got some kind of a bankroll, right? And Rene Descartes, what stood out is that this book makes it very clear that the dude never had to work a day in his life. He was born into such wealth that he literally never had to have a job. He had servants everywhere he went. He wore fancy ruffled clothing with like velvet tassels on them, and I'm not even making all this up. And this was kind of like, it clicked in my brain. It's like, oh man, why is it that all of these advanced philosophers that discover the mysteries of the universe, they get to just sleep in and wake up whenever they want to? This dude went to a Jesuit school, but he was allowed to sleep in. He went to the army, but he was allowed to just not engage in battle because he was there as what I think they call a gentleman volunteer.
A LARPer. He was a
LARPer. But man, I did it all wrong. If we really wanted to be true occultists, we would have just been born super rich.
Yeah, well, you know,
that's the real. In the back of the secret notebook, there was like a little footnote that was like, "P.S. Be rich."
You know, instead of sleeping all day like you were at 2 years old, Thomas, you should have been investing. You should have been buying Bitcoin. You should have been buying up real estate. But instead, you were napping as a 2-year-old little baby.
No, it's our parents' fault because he was born into wealth. His dad and his dad's dad were both successful doctors. And that's where all this money came from, and they invested in real estate. Descartes didn't have to do a damn thing. He was just born into it.
So here, let's get into it. We have a couple of notes, but what'd you think of it? Because it is one of my favorite books, and Descartes is one of my favorite philosophers too, especially with the Voyage to Cartesius. Towards the end, again, the majority of the book is like a biography, and there's actually no reviews of this book or anything on YouTube at all, bro. Like I looked around for people talking about Descartes' Secret Notebook. Nobody has talked about this. Obviously, it's not like some crazy stuff, but I'll give you my opinions later on as we go, because there's obviously the Rosicrucian connection and all that stuff. So I think that on the outside, these guys were, I think Descartes was an occultist to a certain level. And when he was accused of being a Rosicrucian, he never said no, right? Like he's like, I'm tired of all these rumors. Bro, just say no. Just say that you're not, you know what I'm saying? Like, just say you're not part of the group.
Just lie, bro.
But he never denies it, right? So it still leaves that room for speculation. And he was hanging out with dudes who were mystics, who were part of, these other organizations, the Invisibles, and all these other things that came up. So let's get started. I don't know where you want to start here. You want me to pull your screen up, or you're gonna leave it like that?
Yeah, we'll just go beat by beat, man. I got a lot of decent notes on the. So yeah, the full title is Descartes' Secret Notebook, with the subtitle The True Tale of Mathematics, Mysticism, and the Quest to Understand the Universe. and it has a nice little opening quote in here. The very first statement, it says, "Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom." And the book makes a good case, but I would also add in here what they left out. The fear of the Jesuits is also the beginning of wisdom, because Descartes, being terrified of the Inquisition coming and just snatching him up and killing him, is really what drove him to operate in this kind of secrecy. And is probably also what pushed him into allegedly joining the Rosicrucians and linking up with a bunch of other smarty pants dudes.
Yeah, no, the church definitely 100% had a lot of hold on it. They were against what the heliocentric model, like you couldn't talk about. So heliocentric is,
yeah, it was like going on to like a flat earth podcast. Like you weren't allowed to talk about anything revolving around the sun, otherwise everyone would jump on you.
yes, and you would be burned at the stake. I mean, wasn't that what Giordano Bruno was burned for speaking out against the church?
I feel like Descartes would have been at home on our podcast, because we'd be like, bro, you can talk all about the earth revolving around the sun here. just don't read the comments afterwards.
Yeah, and Kepler and all these guys. Yeah, no, 100%. So definitely afraid of the church, and how you're saying it did push him to have the secrecy around his work. And also there was a part where he was accused of being an atheist, and he had to fight his case about being accused of being an atheist. And it was like one of the most major arguments in history or something against him, and he had to write to like some priest and all that. So it was a very serious deal back then to be accused of not believing in God, essentially. Very superstitious.
There was a really interesting thread, and you were asking what I thought of it. We'll get into like a full review as we go on this, but I thought it was written phenomenally well, way better than the previous book that we read, which it was just not up to the same level as this one. It was a fun read. It was engaging. It had a lot of cool information, and there was one thread that I guess I didn't appreciate until we read this, and that's that Descartes was this fish out of water, and that he was raised Catholic, went to a Jesuit school, was basically, from everything I can tell, he was sort of a Catholic his entire life. But then he runs away from the Catholics and joins the Protestants, not realizing that the Protestants kind of hated his views just as much as anyone else might have viewed him. So, and he operated in complete secrecy, and really, he wasn't necessarily at risk of the Catholic Church because he had people in high places of power. Although it's easy to say that in retrospect, because Galileo probably thought the same thing too until he didn't.
Yeah, until he didn't.
There's a quote that this book opens up with, and I don't know who this quote was from. I guess it was from this manuscript, but it says, "Science is like a woman. If faithful, she stays by her husband, she is honored. But if she gives herself to everyone, she is degraded."
She's a whore.
This is some gatekeeping ish right here. like All right, science, don't be giving Juan all these secrets. Those secrets, you gave those to me. Don't go whoring around your truth to everybody.
Yeah, don't be a grifter, right? You were talking about like sustaining yourself to be able to do research, and in this community, whenever you want to monetize your content, you're called a whore and a grifter because, right? How dare you? I'm a gentleman. You can't just give yourself out like that, like, bro. What? But I think that's part of, this grand conspiracy where it's like they want to dumb everybody down. All you have to do is work, work, work. The regular dude who's working 60. There was this article I saw this week that it was some CEO was like a 60-hour work week is the sweet spot for productivity. A 60-hour work week is a lot, bro. Like, that's a lot of time. So imagine spending 60 hours at work, having to come home, tend to your family, tend to your home, and then do research for your podcast that you make
pick one, bro.
that you make no money doing. That's hard, bro. You get what I'm saying? Like, some people are in it. Some people are in it 100% for the art. Like, if it was about the money for me, I would have gave up a long time ago. But I enjoy researching these things, and the job that I have gives me a little bit more free time than a regular job would. So I'm able to read some stuff, or I'm able to listen to while I'm working, and I can do it. But for the regular person, bro, that's not a Manly P. Hall. That's not a Rene Descartes with thousands and thousands of acres of land and collecting rent on all of it. They're not going to research the meaning of reality through mathematics, Thomas. You think they're going to take the time to do that? No way.
See, I think this is where we differ, because I only do this for the money. And man, that $230 a month, it really gets me by. It basically, I get to live in the lap of luxury and kind of engage in what Descartes and Manly Palmer Hall got to. It's amazing. The dollar goes so far these days too. And on that note, I just do want to thank our two brand new sponsors. They're paying me, not you.
Nice.
The Whore of Babylon and the Jesuit Order. So thank you to our two new sponsors that are making all this possible.
Right on, dude. And shout out Albert Pike too. That son of a gun,
And we can't leave out Mazzini. Props to my boy Mazzini. World War III. We're helping that come to fruition, guys.
100%. Shout out to them.
All right, I got a bunch of other really good notes on this one. Here's another one that says, and this, I think this gives it some interesting context. Descartes' time, the first half of the 17th century, was the era of the 30 Years' War, in which Catholics and Protestants were pitted against each other in a series of bloody battles. This period also saw the ruthless oppression by the Catholic Church on scientific and philosophical ideas evidenced by the trial of Galileo and the Inquisition, the persecution of the Church of other thinkers who supported the theory of Copernicus, and the burning of forbidden books. So this dude, Descartes, is growing up in a time when every single thought that enters his mind could potentially get him killed or outcast, especially if this dude was not rich. If Descartes was not rich, I feel like he would have been offed and no one even would have known about it.
Yeah, he would have been a considered a witch or something, right? Or not a witch, but what's the equivalent of a male witch? What would you call a male witch?
A wizard? I think it's a wizard.
Or a wizard or something along those lines. He would have been like a mystic. He would have been, dabbling with this sort of stuff. But would he have been as smart as he was if he was poor? This
is another thing that I picked up from this book, that he goes to this Jesuit college and they've got sort of like a militaristic regimen, the way that everything's operated. But Descartes was weak as a little kid, right? He was like a frail little brittle bone bitch. And if you looked at him the wrong way, he might not recover from it. So for the very beginnings of his life, everyone was kind of treating him with these like velvet gloves on. Even to when he goes to this Jesuit college, his parents are like, look, our baby boy is really fragile. Don't stress him out too much. Don't make him do anything too hard. Where everyone else at this school's got to get up at 5 a.m. And I assume they do some kind of like calisthenics and go and do their studying. Descartes, this dude got to sleep in as late as he wanted to. And it kind of mentioned that the dude would sleep in until like 10, 11 a.m. And then even after he woke up, he
He'd
would just kind
still
of roll over and read a book or two until he felt like getting up and going to school. And man, what a prima donna diva attitude towards school, but also it made me think that this is the only reason that he was able to thrive and become such a master of all this content. Like, it's school is actually what's hurting you. The only thing that he really got out of that Jesuit experience, it seemed, was access to the library
yeah.
of books. And every time he came across a teacher, he would get in trouble because he was reading ahead or he was reading books that were too advanced for him. And man, if that doesn't summarize my view of teachers in general, that they're there to like stop you from learning on your own. No, you got to learn what I'm selling you. Like, I'm the company store. And imagine if he had been a good little schoolboy, we never would have gotten any of these.
So in a way, because of his upbringing, you could say he was, I wouldn't call him a rebel, right? Like, oh, going against the system, but he was kind of playing the system, but only because of his position in society. You get what I'm saying? So because he was Descartes, he was able to, you know, stay in bed as long as he wanted and kind of have the time, because time is, that's what sounds, this is weird to say, that's what sounds fun about going to jail. You're going to have a lot of time. But then, like what you were telling me, like, yeah, you won't get access to all the books you want. So it's like, damn, do I really want to go to jail? You know, because if I was in jail, bro,
You better hope that book you want to read doesn't have a staple in it, because you're not getting it.
Bro, I'd be reading all the stuff. Like, if you were only here to do one thing, you know, and you couldn't do anything else, that does sound like a sort of hell in a way, but at the same time, you'd have all the time to read about all this stuff. But not everyone likes to learn about this, right? So what happens to those people? Like, they just have to exist.
They become teachers.
They become teachers?
Yeah, they become teachers, and then they basically kill everyone else's desire to learn beyond whatever is fed to them through the Rockefeller system.
Yikes. Well,
and good on them. We need people out there to gatekeep and keep everyone else down so that you've got these diamonds in the rough. Like,
make secret
like
societies great again. That's the next hat, bro. Right?
So I'll paraphrase this one bit. This was a great introduction to what the book is apparently going to be about, and it sounds like a freaking Indiana Jones plot line in a way.
Yeah.
So it's about this guy Leibniz, who is on the quest to find Rene Descartes' secret journal. He knows that it exists, and he knows that they were both onto the same thing. And this guy is essentially like a code master. You can show him any puzzle, any coded letter, and in his head, he's already figuring this stuff out. The book makes it sound like this is literally the perfect person to have come across Descartes' journal, because no one else would have been able to decipher it this quickly. And the dude only had like an hour or two to read this secret notebook, and then it was snatched away from him. The guy was like, okay, that's enough. And he wasn't allowed to take notes or anything. So it was miraculous that he even found any of this. So the premise is that they realize there's these hidden manuscripts that are given as a present to this guy's in-law, Pierre Chanut, and he was the ambassador to Sweden. He was basically a confidant of Descartes when Descartes was the philosophy teacher to Queen Christina of Sweden, ultimately where he died. Like, going to Sweden killed this dude. But it basically says that after Descartes' death, they load a box containing Descartes' hidden manuscripts into a ship headed to France. After a bunch of delays, that box was unloaded and then reloaded onto the Seine River in Paris, but it capsized and sank, and this box of all Descartes' writings was underwater for 3 days until a bunch of people run out there and, he instructs his servants, rather. He gets his servants to run out there and get all of these pages and lay them out and let them dry. So here we've got sort of a national treasure, sunken treasure, like hidden mystery going on. They kind of poses this book as if it's going to be a detective novel of some kind, and it kind of does.
And this book was published in 2005. And in 2022, I believe it was. Let's see here. No, the archives were transferred to care in 2013. The inventory was completed in 2017. And it was discovered. So there's been some new discoveries and some translations of Descartes' work that, of course, let me add my. That. Right, in 1633, Descartes was about to finish a two-part book consisting of Le Monde, the World, describing the natural laws that govern the universe, and Le Homme, on man, which examined the body of the humans inhabiting this world. However, after hearing about the papal condemnation of Galileo, Descartes abandoned the publication to avoid a similar fate. Now, after 350 years, a new translation of Le Homme has been found. The text had remained hidden in the archives of the Bibliotheca Thysiana since the 17th century. The manuscript pays a lot of attention to neurophysiology, the way in which the brain functions, and an organ called the pineal gland, which according to Descartes is the link between the immaterial mind and the body. Sounds a lot like that one book, remember, that we read, The Voyage to a World of Cartesius. And I feel like that book is so crucial to understanding Descartes, because there's always been this part of Descartes that I wanted to, and I don't know if it's my schizo mind wanting to link him to like the occult, and I want him to be like this occultist so bad, and maybe he's not, and I'm just like making those parallels. But that book, what if, right? Because the story of him towards the end of his life before he dies is very similar to, maybe it was that, black little homunculus telling the doctor, like, no, get away from me. Don't touch me. I don't want to be bled again. Because, they're supposed to do the minimum, like to try and keep your body alive, while Descartes was out in these other worlds doing his thing until he finally gave in. And then the rest is history. And he was taken out.
See, I'm on the fence now between Descartes died after not properly protecting his body with a homunculus as he was astral projecting on DMT. That's one way that he died. And the other one was that he was poisoned by a Protestant. And this book makes a pretty compelling case of the latter, that in fact he was totally fine. He got a little bit case of the sniffles. He was recovering from it, and then he got taken out because he had made so many enemies. He was no longer in sort of friendly lands. The only person that even liked him was the queen, that hired him to be there, and literally everyone else in her entire council hated this dude. So, well, that's kind of towards the end of the book. We'll get on that, but I think that was fascinating. And I also was reading more into the Voyage to Cartesius, trying to find connections, and more it definitely seems that the Voyage to Cartesius has been interpreted now modern day as a satirical work that's making fun of Descartes, that it was kind of going over the top and poking holes in his claims. And the whole thing about astral projection and flying and talking to these ascended masters about vortices in the universe, that this was maybe trying to make all of it seem absurd. So maybe there's something wrong with us, that we read something that's trying to make fun of Descartes and we're like, yo, this guy was on to something.
No, dude, that's just the deep state trying to make you believe
Right.
the opposite, which you're falling for it, Thomas. That's the thing. You fell for the trap of the deep state. Like, hey, it's all satire. That's what I say. Hey, dude, maybe it is all fake and gay. There's a possibility we might be living in a fake and gay reality. But what if we're not? And that's what keeps me going. Of like, man, this all does sound gay as hell. But maybe it's not.
You just paid too much attention to teachers, and as did I. If there's one thing
go.
I've learned from this book,
You're brainwashed, bro.
I should have paid even less attention in school, which I didn't think was possible. But I didn't realize that this dude was just sleeping in and showing up wherever he wanted and just not even doing his own work. So
I would say that's how you become a flat earther, but obviously not, because Descartes wasn't a flat earther.
Well, there's two. I guess that a flat earther would hear that and be like, oh, Descartes never went to school, so I don't need to go to get no book learning.
Descartes wasn't even real.
It was, well, I guess so. Yeah, touche. You can't really refute that he wasn't real. Because it happened before I was born, and everyone knows anything that happened before I was born has not been proven to me
It's
directly.
not
So
observable, bro. So
the book too, I'll say this: the premise of the book is that there's this secret code and these unintelligible numbers, and it contains all of this information that could have gotten him killed, and he kept it hidden for his entire life. And Illuminati confirmed. But the problem, I guess, is at the end, the reveal is not major. Like, even I understood it, which means that it couldn't have been that groundbreaking. Although, again, it's so easy for us too to be like, oh yeah, it's a Cartesian coordinate system. I know what X, Y, Z means. You know, how hard is that? Apparently, it was really damn hard back then. People didn't really think in these terms. So even coming up with a simple premise like that completely changes the whole world. And we were mentioning too about how he was afraid of the Inquisition. He was afraid because of what Galileo was going through and the same things that Kepler and Copernicus kind of ran into. So instead of publishing numerous books, not just Le Monde, the world, but a whole bunch of other things that he wanted to release that he didn't, he came up with a pen name, Polybius, which is also that conspiratorial arcade game that like eats your soul or whatever. But one of the things that Descartes was thinking was, okay, I'm not going to release the world because it's too much based on this like heliocentric model, which might get me killed. So I'm going to rewrite everything using a completely different form of logic with these Platonic solids and mathematical. And I guess in his mind, it was like, and then no one can accuse me of being a heretic. And I feel like as smart as he was with math and science and all, I don't know how well he understood people and just, I guess, the time that he was in, that he really thought that I can still say there's a heliocentric Earth, and if I just show my work, then they won't come after me. It feels like he would have been so wrong, man. If he would have released this, one person could have just been like, wait a minute, this guy's saying the sun's in the middle of the universe. And then he would have been on a cross, like with all that hard work and everything.
Maybe he's working with the devil. And then, we would have never heard of anything else of Descartes.
And for anyone that thinks that they're super smart, here's the code. If you can solve this code, you don't even have to read the rest of the book. You can go back to Housewives or American Gladiators or whatever you were watching before this. But there's two sets of numbers that they find in the secret journal: 4, 6, 8, 12, 20. And then under that, 4, 8, 6, 20, 12. And apparently, if you just see those two sequences of numbers, you'll immediately know everything that he was trying to hide from the rest of the world, just in those two sequences of numbers. And I do find this fascinating because this ultimately is what the whole secret was about, and this is the basic premise. Now, this isn't everything that Descartes ever came up with. This is just one formula, or like a proof, basically, mathematically, that shows a constant that hadn't been discovered until now. But it is amazing how just these two sequences of numbers are the secret to this entire book and the cause for him to be running from country to country. When you read these numbers, were you immediately like, oh, I know what the answer is?
There's a part of me, too, that is wondering if this whole story of Leibniz was even real. Like, was there a secret notebook?
Was there a shipwreck? Was there any of this? Yeah, I think so, too, because he had his own reason, and it was because... And this kind of disappoints me a little bit, but also this is just like typical human fare, where Leibniz
didn't want to be accused of plagiarism.
He didn't want to be accused of copying someone else. And it's not enough for the world to be like, damn, this guy just found this mathematical proof that makes it easier to describe our environment in objective terms. But instead of celebrating that, everyone's like, yeah, where'd you get that? I bet you just copied off someone else. And now this guy's got to spend how much effort and time just to prove that he didn't get it. So the whole reason for even finding this notebook was just to prove that he came to the same answer, but in a different way.
No one's going to understand this meme, but Isaac Newton was like, You know that meme with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yeah.
Hey, where'd you get that? Show your work for that. Where'd you find that at? It's like, no, dude, I promise I came up with this myself. It's like, did you? Did you really? So,
This is where Common Core came from. The same thing. It was like, I know you got to the answer, but can you show your work? And if you can't show that you did it the way that you were supposed to have done it, then you didn't really get it. What a weird Kafka-esque reality. I wonder what Descartes would feel about Common Core if he even woke up early enough to get to school to experience it.
well, that was a big part in school, right? Especially in mathematics, which, Descartes being the father of analytical geometry, which I actually did take in high school. The whole concept, it was always show your work. You couldn't just put the answer. You had to show your work and find how to, you got to that answer. And I mean, it makes sense. But yeah, he was definitely afraid of being accused of plagiarism a lot.
Okay, here's so he had a good childhood, it sounds like, even if he was like a frail little cripple boy. He would just walk around in the woods and observing nature, not really a care. He wasn't being sent to the mines or having to like tan leather or do any of this other stuff that everyone else in the countryside probably had to go through. And then this is what explains it. It says the Descartes family was wealthy. Rene would inherit even more assets directly from grandfathers on both sides, both who had been successful medical doctors. So again, this Descartes was born into wealth, never had to work a day in his life that he didn't volunteer to do on his own accord. And from everything I can tell, he never ran out of money. The dude was just spending money every day, all day, and still never ran out of it. In fact, he probably ended up with even more wealth than he started with because part of his inheritance was a whole bunch of land, and he didn't want to have to deal with tending the land and shaking
Ugh.
people down for rent money and mortgage and stuff. So he was just like, I'm selling it. And he sold the land off, which was another big windfall of cash. So this guy never was left wanting for anything except for more knowledge.
It sounds an awful like Crowley, except Crowley got into some other stuff and spent all his money in his lifetime. But he did do a lot of occult stuff. That's pretty cool.
I like this line too. Rene Descartes would spend much time during his adult life managing his inheritance. Oh man, I feel rough for this guy, man. He was like always bogged down by managing all of this wealth. What a rough life that must have been.
Oh, I gotta go again, collect this rent money again from these people. I just want to sit down and figure out the secrets of reality, dude. I just want to do math problems all day long. That doesn't sound fun either.
The wealth would enable him to pursue his interests without concern about livelihood, and it would afford him to indulge his whim of volunteering for military campaigns as a gentleman soldier without compensation, simply for the thrill of adventure. And he could afford luxurious accommodations wherever he traveled and employ servants and a valet. So again, this guy, he took glamping to the next level. Not only was he glamping, but he would show up on a battlefield and be like, where do I put up my inflatable mansion? Where do my 12 servants go? And they're like, bro, we're in the middle of a war right now. Like, I might die today. And he's like, oh, no, I'm not. I'm just going to stay here and I'm observe you. I'm going to
I'm not fighting.
I'm going to plot out where you're going on this paper and figure out the secrets of the universe based on how you die.
Yeah, the father of analytical geometry and also the father of glamping.
So, and he went to war for fun. I don't know a lot of other people that just go to war for fun. They didn't even need the money for this. And then it also says at 11 years old, he gets sent away to a prestigious Jesuit college, La Flèche. I'm probably butchering that, but and he attributes his time at this Jesuit college to allow him to think in this very methodical, structured way. Even the impression that Platonic solids and geometry, he kind of, or at least this book, attributes to his time at this Jesuit college because of the way that the courtyard was structured, and that it almost became like a geometrical memory palace to him and this crazy frame of reference. And here's one of the hot takes that I got coming away from reading this book. Jesuit college seems like the place that you would want to go if you wanted to learn anything that was legit. If you didn't want to just learn about bloodletting and like weird stuff that's been phased out. If you wanted to truly understand the nature of the world, geometry, math, science, philosophy, Jesuit colleges were almost the only place that you could go and do that. Despite all the heat that the Jesuits get, it almost seems that if you didn't go to a Jesuit college, you were screwed. Like history doesn't care about you.
So I'm trying to find out exactly how much money he had, like, you know, in dollar terms. Have you ever heard of the company called Descartes Systems Group?
No.
So apparently it's they own Descartes.com, but it's a publicly traded company founded in 1981. They do logistics software, supply chain management software, and cloud-based services for logistic businesses. And I'm not saying it was founded by Descartes or maybe the Descartes family. I'm sure they're still around, right? Like the Descartes family would still be around. Maybe they were still are well
I
off.
don't know. Not from Rene Descartes' lineage specifically, because this book, unless I missed something, he had a daughter, but then the daughter died pretty young. And that was the end. That was the end of Descartes', at least Rene Descartes' family line. Not to say that the rest of his family tree branched out from there, but it doesn't sound like he left anyone in his immediate bloodline.
I don't know, brother. This Descartes company is pretty big. I mean, they have they do billions of dollars. They have billions of dollars in assets. Well, millions of dollars, almost $1 billion. So they're pretty big. So I wonder who got his his stuff, you know, after the fact. Like, I know who got his material possessions, but like, was his money in there? Because how'd they carry money back then? It was all gold, wasn't it?
I mean, they had banking, so it even mentions in this that when he would get these huge amounts of, if it were gold or wherever it was, he would immediately bring that to a bank somewhere so that he didn't have to actually lug around all of his savings. And he had money in banks all across Europe, it almost seems like.
Yikes, dude. The Jays got it.
they quite literally did.
They kept it.
And then, good.
No, I said they kept his money after he passed on.
There was a description. Let me see if I can. Oh, can I pull it up? I'll see if I can pull it up. Yeah, here.
The hell is that?
So that was an apple fritter. It wasn't poop. This is a picture of Rene Descartes, or at least a illustration of what he wore to his Jesuit college.
What's up with that?
Notice how frilly this outfit is.
Is he Jewish? Look at the candles. Isn't that what do they call that? Well, it's got 6 candles, isn't it?
I don't think Jews own candles, no.
No, what's the thing that they use with the 7 for Hanukkah, whatever it is that they celebrate? Oh my God.
Here's a description of what he wore. It said, the college was run as a semi-military school. The students had to wear a uniform including breeches with pom-pom fastenings, a fancy blue blouse with large puffy sleeves, and a felt hat. Each student was also given a long list of items they had to bring to school: candles, pencils, quills, notebooks, and items of personal use. And then they also note that this Jesuit paramilitary college that he went to was kind of like a prep school. So it kind of served the role as like a high school leading into college in a way.
I was talking about a menorah, bro. That thing on the left there looks like a menorah a little bit.
I mean, that image was just AI generated, so it's not like an actual.
It's trying to tell us something, though,
rendition.
Bro.
But I just wanted to know what the hell the blue blouse with the pom poms and the puffy sleeve. I think it did a pretty decent job. And yeah, he's got his little book bag full of pencils and quills and notebooks and candles
and money, you know.
Yeah, the back right, it's just like a stack of money. Yeah. And then it says that this guy, I'm gonna say Pierre, I don't know how, Pierre Charlet, who was a relative of the Descartes family, and Rene would later describe as almost a father. And it says this is the guy that was running the Jesuit school. So Descartes gets the guy running the school as his mentor, which explains why he was allowed to sleep in and do whatever he want. And it said that Rene got unprecedented privileges so that the boy would not feel stress and hope his health would improve. Thus, he allowed Rene to sleep late in the mornings, stay in bed until he felt well enough to join the others in the classroom. This arrangement allowed Descartes a lifelong routine of waking up late in the mornings, staying in bed, thinking and working until he was ready to get up and face the day. Most of his life, until the last few months in Sweden, with the exception of periods when he was involved in an army, Descartes had never had a forced wake up in the morning, but rather arose whenever his body was sufficiently rested. So this dude never had to use an alarm clock in his entire life until the last few months of his life when he died from it. And again, if I'm taking anything away, I've been living my life all wrong, man. Like I should have been sleeping in and just going to school whenever I felt like it and laying in bed and reading and doing my own thing and being rich, which is the only way you can do those things. But I mean, and I'm not even really joking about this part, that if you are so rich that you don't have to play by the rules of society, the best way you can use that to your advantage is to learn, but learn at your own pace and learn the things that you want to learn and do it the way that you want to do it. And hopefully you don't become a flat earther at the course of that process, but you might actually become a genius and doing the opposite, waking up on a strict schedule and going to school and doing what you're told. This is not going to help you solve the secrets of the universe.
I don't know how true this is, but apparently Descartes was only 5'1".
Short king.
Would I dare say maybe Descartes was
A homunculus?
Hey, I mean, that's part of it, right? They're not perfect. They're kind of fragile. Like, you gotta kind of nurture them. Could it be possible?
So that means in Voyage to Cartesius, he was actually a homunculus astral projecting, having another homunculus watch over his body. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet.
That would make sense, right? That's what they're trying to occult, Thomas. So by them coming on being like, hey, this is all satire. Dude, Henry Cornelius Agrippa said the same thing. All the occultists have always said the same thing of like the satirical, like, hey, it's all fake and gay. It's all supposed to be funny, but at the same time, they're putting out real stuff to some, right? Real stuff to some. So what are they truly trying to hide? Is the occult occulting the fact that the occult is fake and gay, or is it occulting that it's actually real? You got what I'm saying? Like there's something to be said there. Like,
well, also the Voyage to Cartesius book, that was what, like 1685? This is still 17th century. So whoever wrote that might have also been concerned that they would be claimed as a heretic and face all sorts of ramifications. Even if you don't get burned at the stake, you could be ostracized and excluded from your community. And now you're kind of just whittle away and starve to death or become poor in some other country, right? So it might be one of those secrets like, hey, I was just joking, guys. Like, yeah, I said that the sun was the center of the earth, but or the universe, but I was just kidding. I was just joshing you guys. You fell for it? Wow. I guess
how gullible are you? But also, wasn't the dude who wrote The Voyage to the World of Cartesius, wasn't he a Jesuit?
He was. And again, man, props to the Jesuits for even
Illuminati
making
confirmed
all this information possible, man.
We're just making fun of him. Right. But yet he was like a René Descartes esotericist, that he was like adding to lexicons and stuff like that of Descartes' life. So he was a specialist in Descartes' life. But yeah, you're the guy that you're specializing in, you're going to talk smack about and write a satirical work on him. I don't know. It doesn't add up to me, bro. It just doesn't make any sense.
There's another interesting thread that came up on when I was reading this book, because there's if you go online and search for this Rene Descartes and you search for like modern day occultist thinking and applying it to Descartes, there's lots of critiques that it's like, yeah, well, he was a Jesuit. Rene Descartes was a Jesuit. And I guess, I mean, technically, he was a Catholic and he went to a Jesuit school and he learned at that Jesuit school and he went and spent time with other Jesuits. But also, if you didn't go to a Jesuit school, what the hell, like, what were you even learning? It seems that the Jesuits had such a stranglehold on all knowledge and academia in general that that was your only option. Even if you didn't want to be a Jesuit, you were going to have to go to a Jesuit school to get any of this education. So now, hundreds of years in the future, it's real easy to point at almost any philosopher or mathematician and just be like, "Oh, those are Jesuits, bro." Like, yeah, but I don't know if that would make Rene Descartes a Jesuit any more than if, you know, I went to public school, that now I am out here like promoting public education and the Department of Education. I don't think that's how it works. Just because you're forced to go through a system doesn't mean that you're now in support of that system, especially as an 11-year-old.
Yeah, and especially since his you know, quote unquote family, almost a father, was in charge of the school. So maybe it was just what was available to him at the time, and that's why he went there, right? So I
There's
agree
some
with you.
parallels here too with Adam Weishaupt, right? Adam Weishaupt grew up and his uncle ran a Jesuit school of Ingolstadt, who
Really?
allowed him to get into this high position and be the youngest canon professor of law in history of Bavaria. And he also gets accused of being a Jesuit. And it's like, well, you kind of had to be. Like, if you went to school at all, then you were a Jesuit by association, I guess.
Interesting. Huh.
I was making these little footnotes on like whatever body or life I get to inhabit next. Hopefully I can pass these notes on. There's really just 3 steps if you want to be as smart as Descartes, right? Step 1, be rich. Step 2, sleep in. And then step 3, teach yourself. If you can do those 3 things, if you're capable of doing those 3 things, then you're actually on track to be an absolute genius and kind of conquering the world. But I feel like out of those 3, be rich, sleep in, teach yourself, one of those is probably more important than the other 2.
I know that mathematics serves a purpose. I know that a lot of the contributions of Descartes have changed a lot of aspects of our reality, such as GPS systems, you know, video games even are kind of sort of on the same plane. Any CAD CAM software, right, to design anything is based off the Cartesian coordinate system. But how much of, like, for example, have you ever used calculus in your real life, Thomas? And I wonder how much of mathematics and concepts of mathematics are more of thought experiments to make people think instead of actually being usable out in the real world. And how you're saying teach yourself. Well, how much, you know, without having to make something up, how much could you teach yourself about things? If not making something up, making up a system like calculus or, you know, anything else, or maybe, you know, coming up with your own flat earth model, like that's kind of sort of teaching yourself in a way, right? And I understand it's to think outside the box, but at the end of the day, it's still fake and gay. You get me?
Kind of. Although I'm a special case. I actually love it when people bring this up, like how many people use calculus and trigonometry in their lives after school. Well, like, me specifically, I actually did have to use it constantly because one of the things that I did while I was at Disney
You're a
was
Jesuit.
3D animation and game programming. So if you wanted to make a game that, for example, had things flying through the air, underwater, and you needed to replicate the buoyancy, we made simulations showing the Hohmann transfer, which is how they would like leap from one planet to the other in orbit. All of that does require extensive amounts of calculus and trigonometry. So I think everyone does use it in different capacities. It's just so easy because you got a calculator, you got something that does that for you. But the premise of breaking everything down into a triangle and deriving from that, I personally believe it's hard coded into our brains. Like we can't not use trigonometry and calculus constantly. And these guys that were kind of discovering this, they were just figuring out the system in which all this takes place. It's not like someone sat down and created calculus or created geometry. They're just the ones that started putting names to it all. Like, for example, one of the other claims this book makes is about how Descartes was instrumental in creating these new fields of math, because after he creates these Cartesian coordinate systems and he starts drawing circles and lines and angles, he was like, wait a minute, I can write a number on this line that now represents what the diameter or the radius is, because he's got this Cartesian coordinate system, which again seems like, oh yeah, of course, who doesn't know what XY grid looks like? Everybody before Descartes kind of came up with this and popularized it. No one really thought in these ways, and that everything that had to do with geometry and math was basically visual. Like they were having to draw out these circles and these lines and plotting it all without being able to tell what the math behind all this was. If they wanted to figure out how to make a perpendicular or parallel line, they weren't measuring it and finding out the numbers, because the calculus for that didn't exist yet. But what did exist were just compass and squares. Freemasonry basically exposed there, right? This is obviously
Illuminati confirmed.
Yeah, exactly.
Spoken like a true Fed, bro. Spoken like a true Fed. Just justifying it for the Jesuits and everybody else.
But here's probably one of my favorite notes in this book. And he's saying that talking about this ability for him to sleep in late and show up to school whenever he wanted to. This was especially useful in mathematics, where he could derive ideas by himself without having to sit through the material slowly with an entire class. And this habit of intellectual independence enabled him to forge ahead swiftly and later in life to create new mathematical and scientific knowledge without being held back by conventional beliefs. And then it also was talking about how this Jesuit education, they taught Greek mathematics, Euclid, Pythagoras, Archimedes. They talked about rhetoric from Cicero and Virgil, about Platonic method of argumentation, which is basically grammar, logic, rhetoric. He got the proper 7 liberal arts, right? He got the trivium and the quadrivium. And just us not having that today too feels like a major setback. Like, who is going to school at any age now and actually reading Cicero and learning about logic, grammar, and rhetoric? It doesn't really happen anymore.
No, it doesn't. Yo, keep going, bro. I'm gonna grab my coffee real quick.
All right. Well, it makes here's the Illuminati confirmed Masons, but they're making a very strong case that the way that all geometry and math was handled up until this point was using these two objects: a straight edge in order to make lines and perfect right angles, and a compass. And every single problem that would come across, you would use these two tools in order to do everything with it. And this is where the Cartesian coordinate system really shines, is that it allows you to keep using these tools, but also break away from them and keep working and do things that would not be allowed by just straight lines, which I think is also when people talk about Euclidean and non-Euclidean mathematics, the main difference is that Euclidean math is the premise that everything is being solved by straight lines, that every geometric or mathematical problem can be summarized by these straight lines, whereas non-Euclidean math, it doesn't take that into account. This is when it gets into like Einstein theory of relativity, and where like rules change based on micro and macrocosm scales. But I don't know. I found this was endlessly fascinating, that the compass and the ruler, that these things are what was the basis of all mathematical knowledge. And this predates Freemasonry, right? If anything, Freemasons came up with their symbol based on the fact that the entire world and reality was described using geometry with these two tools.
Spoken like a true Fed. Yeah, no, but I agree with you, bro. Like this, the knowledge, in my opinion, goes back to whenever these secret societies were founded. But even these secret societies, right, they're being influenced by the people before them. Was Pythagoras a Mason? Would he be considered a Mason? He's also a part of, he's in Freemasonry, isn't he?
Pythagoras? No, I mean, Freemasonry as we know it today is basically from a resurgence in maybe the 1700s. You can maybe trace it back as early as the 14 or 1500s, but it doesn't even necessarily go back as far as the Templars, let alone to Pythagoras. So, I mean, if anything, the Masons just took symbols that were already filled with, they were already charged, right? And they were just like, we're going to take that. Now we're going to use that. And it has this effect that now everyone today that sees the square and compass, they're like, oh, that's Freemasonry. But if Descartes would have seen this, he wouldn't have thought Freemasonry. He would have thought Pythagoras or Euclid or any of these other more ancient forms of mathematics.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
There's also a note here that he was a swordsman. One of the other classes that he got to attend at this Jesuit college was being a swordsman. And I don't know how much I believe some of the other stories that come up in this book, but him being a swordsman and it being like his favorite, I guess, like non-nerd activity ends up becoming incredibly helpful. He fends off pirates. He gets into duels with other guys over chicks. And because he's such a masterful swordsman, things work out for him. It also mentions that he was literally a contemporary of the Three Musketeers. So this, like, he was kind of like a Three Musketeer kind of dude. He shows up in his frilly felt hat with the feather and the pom-poms, but he's got a sword and he'll cut you.
You think that he knew about the Three Musketeers?
Yeah, I mean, he was a contemporary of it, so I would assume that even if he didn't read the book, he would have known the archetype that the book was based on. The Three Musketeers now, it feels like a glimpse back into the past. Like, oh man, I can't believe it's like a romanticized version of just street hoodlums that are just going out and like robbing people and doing horrible things. Like a modern day version of Three Musketeers would just be three gangsters with Glocks, I assume. But because it's old and rich white dudes wearing felt hats and feathers, it kind of has like a romantic side to it.
No, hold on, dude.
So was based on this.
It says Descartes couldn't have known about the Three Musketeers because it was written by Alexander Dumas in the 19th century. When the hell did the Three Musketeers?
Well, no, the book was, but the actual premise, like the Three Musketeers themselves that he was writing about would have been contemporary to René Descartes. Like René Descartes himself could have been one of these Three Musketeers.
I got
so
you.
Yeah, he wouldn't have read the book, but he would have known what the Three Musketeers were because he would be like, this is my life. Like that was something that I did.
I got you. Now that makes sense.
Another note, throughout his life, Descartes would never be without a valet. He chose them well. His valets were always extremely loyal to him and would literally risk their lives for his safety and well-being. And when I read this, I was just thinking Count of Monte Cristo, who also is a swordsman that discovers forbidden knowledge and gets cast out because of that and slowly works himself back up. But he wasn't able to do any of this without having this loyal valet and servant by his side. So now I can't shake this comparison between Count of Monte Cristo and René Descartes and the Three Musketeers. And it says right here, Descartes lived during the time of the swashbuckling adventures depicted in the Three Musketeers.
I got you. Yeah, that makes sense.
Also, he was a Vegas playboy. So after he gets out of school, he ends up traveling the world. He goes to Paris. And while he's in Paris, he realizes that he loves cards and he loves games of chance. And I imagine they don't say this directly in the book, but it's probably because he knew how to count cards. He probably realized like everyone else at this table is an absolute idiot. They didn't go to Jesuit school like I did and sleep in and get to teach themselves. So they don't understand what the real odds are. That guy doesn't understand that if he hits right now, he's going to bust. So like him using this only allowed him to get even more fame for being like a smart and like a playboy, but he also got even more money. Now he's making money off gambling, rich getting richer, right? And it says that He was so successful at his games, winning significant amounts of money, which made him even more popular. He was constantly surrounded by people, and life for him was a continuous, endless party. The men would parade down the streets of Paris pursuing beautiful women. Now, just imagine if he's in Vegas, this is just like going to Vegas, killing it at the tables, and then just like hooking up with chicks the entire time you're there. And he basically did this for a year straight in Paris. He becomes this Vegas playboy archetype.
At 5'1".
I mean, if you got money, I think that adds at least 12 inches to your height. If you got his kind of money.
You got that Riz, bro. Rene Descartes Riz.
And this is the part that I feel out of the whole book, I connected with this part the most. And it's that after a year of play and enjoyments of all kinds, Rene Descartes felt the need to become more serious. And to concentrate on his work, this young man felt he had to distance himself from his many friends, but they made it hard to do so. Whenever Descartes stayed home to read and work, his friends would pop over to his apartment and beseech him to join them on the streets and night spots. In desperation, Descartes took drastic measures. He secretly moved and did not give his friends his new address. I've gone through, and you have too, gone through this feeling of like, man, if I'm ever gonna finish this book or this project or whatever, I just need to like shut my phone off and change my email and just make it so nobody can get in contact with me. And this guy literally did it. He brought this to the extreme. He did move and he ghosted everyone that was in his phone basically.
He just dipped, but he gave his address to like a friend of his or something, right? So they at least could forward. Or is this before that? Because I know, was it somebody followed him and saw where he was at?
No, it was before that. And what happened is that everyone's like, "Where's the car, bro? This guy was the life of the party. He was like winning money." And I feel
lit.
like he was the fire that was like burning for everyone else to kind of like huddle around. He was the center of this party. And they start wondering like, where the hell did this guy go, bro? And at one point, someone sees his valet walking around in a city, and they tail his valet, and they trace him all the way back into his new apartment. And when they look into the window, they see the dude is like deep in thought, and he's like studying, and he's reading books. And his friend decides not to interrupt him. But now the cat's out of the bag a little bit. He knows where he's at. And this kind of allows people to start sending messages to him. But yeah, he was gone for a long period of time until one of his friends literally tailed his servant to figure out where he was at.
And then he was like, you know what? I'm not going to mess with him. I'm just going to let him be. And then he just never said anything, right?
I don't know how much I believe that either. Or that's a true friend, right? A friend that's like, damn, I finally found Juan, but here's Juan all busy learning about homunculus. He's doing something weird in that sand bath, and he's like doing weird things with cow dung, but I'm going to leave him to it. I'm not going to interrupt his process because he's in the middle of it.
That's a true friend, bro. I would hope that you would do that for me. If I ever dipped and didn't tell anybody, dude.
I just walk by, I look through your window, I see you doing something unspeakable into a pile of cow manure, and I'm just like, he's hard at work. I'm gonna let him see this through.
That's right.
Okay, and then there was man, I wish I knew what this was. That Descartes also started solving all these puzzles, and apparently this was kind of a trend of the day that they would like mathematicians would leave these what they thought were unsolvable puzzles posted up on like billboards, almost like a wanted poster, but instead of wanted dead or alive, it was like solve this math problem. And Descartes ate these things up, and not only did he eat them up, but he would just solve them within hours or sometimes days of seeing it. And like these were problems that had been around for decades, in some cases even centuries. And this is kind of what allowed him to bond with other people. And I think this was his entry into the Rosicrucians. I kind of, after reading this book, the book doesn't make this claim, but it was almost like these puzzles were left around as a invitation to join the Rosicrucians. It wasn't obvious, but it was like, if you can solve this, then we want you. And I think that this is what happened to Descartes.
Yeah, no, I think that's that is part of it too, right? Because they were all about cracking codes. even Leibniz was all about, cryptography was real big in that. Paracelsus was trained in that. Henry Cornelius Agrippa was trained in that. So it was about hiding messages, and right, puzzles are kind of sort of messages too. So if you can solve the puzzle, you can extract the message, and then that way you can talk freely within this society or group of people that share the same interests as you, right?
There was another thing too. I couldn't figure out where Descartes stood on gematria, because he rolled with a bunch of guys that were into gematria. In particular, he's got this one quote where it says, Descartes wrote his friend from his camp, and in this letter he writes, I desire to give the public not an Ars Brevis of Lull, which was a book by this guy Ramon Lull, but a science based on new foundations. And he was talking about this Lull guy. Lull's work was a mixture of Kabbalah and mysticism, which was combining letters and numbers in an attempt to extract new knowledge about the universe. And he was saying, like, I don't want to make what that guy made, but he was clearly inspired by this. And this almost feels like gematria would have been one of the oldest forms of cryptology, of like substituting numbers and letters and rearranging them, as we see Descartes does himself in his own secret notebook. So I would love to know where he stood on gematria.
So, gematria is a real practice, right? It's Jewish in origin. It's about assigning, right, a numerical value to a letter.
Don't be racist.
Right, whatever. It's Jewish. Assigning a numerical value to a letter. I believe it is something, right, in a mystical sense of, hey, if these sacred letters add up to this number, then that number in return must be sacred as well. But how you're saying this part of it, and what people nowadays in the occult community, what they're doing, I think they're doing their own schizo version of gematria to try and justify their belief as to what's happening. Everything is a ritual, right? Everything is this thing that's being manipulated. Therefore, because these people's dates line up with these certain words, because they have the same numerical value, therefore that proves that it's a ritual. But they can never tell you what the ritual is for, or what the ritual is, or who's it's they. This group of mysterious people is conducting this ritual. That's why that person died on that such date. And that's all it is. It's just like schizo posting of like trying to make connections where connections aren't there. Like the whole voyage to Cartesius was Descartes a Rosicrucian? Was he actually floating through space on DMT, gathering information from other solar systems and stuff like galaxies and stuff like that? Probably not, but it's fun to think about.
Well, I think where modern day gematriticians, is that a word? Where they fail is they've got steps 2 and 3 down, right? They're sleeping until noon and they're teaching themselves, but they skipped part 1, which is where you're supposed to be ungodly wealthy. If you start with being wealthy and then you do the other stuff, then your gematria will actually be valuable. But if you're poor, then your gematria doesn't mean anything.
There you go.
It's an unfortunate rule of the confines of this physical reality that we find ourselves in.
Let me solve this gematria before I got to go clock in at Walmart to do my my gift.
There was another thing. I'm not going to go on too much of a tangent because I swear we could talk about this other topic for hours. But it mentioned how Rene Descartes was fascinated by these Lullian wheels, which I've also came to find out are called thought machines.
Yeah.
And it was because there wasn't necessarily a scientific method well defined at this point in time. And one of the ways that you could systematically analyze a thought without letting your bias seep in and without getting all like unscientific about it were these lull wheels. And the lull wheel, you would basically just put a bunch of letters around the outside and letters on the inside, and however many spokes and what the letters represented could mean something different to you and to the next person. But essentially, you would have these statements on this wheel that would say like God, justice, society, math, like just like basic general terms. And then there would be comparisons like is greater than, is lesser than, weighs more than, is bigger than, is smaller than, all these different ways to quantify stuff. And what you would do is you would say like, okay, Juan, like Juan's going to be our subject. You would spin the wheel and it would literally read out a statement like Juan is smaller than God, right? And you would sit there and contemplate that. And then you'd be like, okay, Juan is heavier than Gematria. And you would sit there and you would contemplate that. And what it would do is it would force you to take any topic at all that you could think of and make you systematically consider it in like 20 different perspectives. And then you could for yourself figure out what you really felt about a certain topic. And if you weren't using one of these thought machines or one of these logic wheels, then it's just like, what do I think about Juan? And just kind of like coming up with your own random stabs in the dark. But that means that every time a new subject came your way, you weren't making it pass through the exact same test. So this was a way to have a structure about how you would think about something and come up with different conclusions. I feel like this is such a fascinating topic. It's easy to understate, but without and these Lullian wheels were actually the prototypes to what we would consider a calculator today. Like the fact that you can like plug numbers in and hit equals. Yeah, this was like the first computer was actually figuring out how to think about things.
Yeah, and that's what Babbage did essentially with his machine and everything. But I believe Lull created those to convert Muslims to, I believe it was Christianity.
Didn't work.
Oh, well, obviously not. But I'm sure he maybe got one or two people to convert because of it. Maybe.
That would be kind of funny because then the Muslims are like, bro, you realize we're the ones that invented algebra, right? Okay, here's where it starts getting interesting, where Descartes starts having these vivid dreams, and the dreams are what leads him to all of these revelations and discoveries that he's got. And it was a sequence of 3 very vivid and very powerful dreams. The first dream was that Descartes was walking the streets, beset by a violent wind raging through town, bending trees and howling through doorways. The wind was so strong he had to lean and walked hunched to the ground. He felt pain from this great natural violence and was desperate to find shelter from the storm. Then he basically sees like a dream version of this Jesuit college that he went to, and he went into it to pray, but remembered that he had just passed a person without salutation and wanted to retrace his steps to excuse himself, but the violent wind pushed him strongly against the church. So then he finally goes and he sees this guy and he calls out to him by name, and he wakes up. Short version, he wakes up from this. But this he takes this as he's thinking about it, like this was pushing him against the church. Like literally the ideas that he's getting in his dreams are put him at odds with the church. So this was sort of like a premonition of what was to come. The second dream, and this is, I don't know why this matters, but it said that first dream, he was sleeping on his left side. So he wakes up.
So
yeah, go ahead.
One of the interesting parts about Descartes too, and these dreams, right, have been debated, have been interpreted many, many times over. And when you think about it, this guy who was so influential, right, he got one of his greatest ideas, according to him, one of the greatest discoveries ever, through a series of dreams. All right. And this is where I talk about where, like, all the things that we've said, how much of our ideas are actually ours, how much is divinely inspired, how much is interdimensional knowledge, if you want to call it that. Because after these dreams, he wakes up and he goes, I've, have the greatest discovery of all time, or something along those lines of what he says. But these dreams, this is a guy who was, again, having sort of mystical experiences, because when you have a dream, Thomas, how much time, again, you're not rich, so take the first step out. How many times have you sat down and interpret one of your dreams like so vividly and deeply? And the fact that he was sleeping on his left side, there's something called dream yoga, which depending on which position you sleep in will induce different dreams. That's how I've come to interpret it, where like depending on how it's like doing yoga, you I guess, unlock different parts of your brain to dream differently. This is something that allegedly was done by people in the past, right? There was dream incubation, uh, altars and places where you could go to dream. The Greeks had that. Morpheus, right? That whole thing. So by them talking about he's sleeping on his left side, right now it's going to be a different side if he changes sides. Now he's in a different sleep dream yoga position to dream differently. I don't know. That's the way I've come to interpret it.
I wonder what kind of mathematical concept he could have came up with if he had like passed out in the back of an Uber in like an uncomfortable position, and then he wakes up and he's like, "I can solve infinity now," right?
Yeah.
And he never would have came to that if he hadn't fallen asleep in that Uber in that position.
Yeah. Hindsight's
So, okay.
2020, bro.
So first dream was sleeping on his left side. Then he changed sides and fell asleep again, which brought him into this dream yoga version of the second dream. And in this one, he's in a large room where he felt the room fade, and suddenly he heard a terrible sharp bang, which he believed to be thunder. The storm of the previous dream had returned, but it felt like a hallucination. The tempest could not reach him. He was protected in the safety of the room. He then saw the room fill with magnificent sparkles of light and woke up again. So that was dream 2.
Just want to remind everyone, make sure to check out the show on Patreon, patreon.com/the One-on-One podcast. I constantly get emails. Oh, only one episode a week. Yeah, one episode a week for the public, but for as little as $5 a month, you can get up to 2, sometimes 3, sometimes one episode per day on the Patreon, as well as on the YouTube channel as a member for as little as $5. And there's also on the Patreon over 250 episodes only found on there. There's an extensive backlog of episodes. So check that out. If for those interested, for those asking, make sure to follow the show on YouTube, One Podcast. Also, One Media. I am going live every Tuesday on there streaming. I also go live on twitch.tv/One Podcast. So make sure to check me out on there Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern. And make sure to get your copy of the Occultus Mundi Homunculus Owner's Manual, all that good stuff at tjojp.com. Can pick up your copies there or go over to the Ko-Fi. I'm on Facebook, Twitch, Kick, Rumble, all that good stuff. You know where to find it, and enjoy this episode. Okay.
The third one, I guess, is the one that brings it all together. In his third dream, Descartes was sitting at a desk with an encyclopedia, as I do too. This is all I ever dream about. I'm just sitting at a desk with an encyclopedia. It's the coolest
Same.
dreams ever. In front of him, when Descartes put his hand to reach for the encyclopedia, he found another book entitled in Latin. He opened this book to a random page and found a poem, and he read the first line, and the line translated to, "What road shall I follow in life?" Then an unknown person appeared and presented Descartes with another verse, and as soon as Descartes tried to take hold, it disappeared. Instead of it, he found his encyclopedia, but this time it was not complete as it had been earlier. Both the unknown person and the book disappeared. Descartes continued to sleep, but he was now in a heightened state of consciousness that told him what he had just experienced was a dream. He was able to interpret the dream while still asleep. To me, this means lucid dreaming, right? The third dream, he actually entered a lucid dream where he was able to analyze what was going on and try different things and like look at that book in more detail. And now this actually sounds either made up or some next level lucid dreaming, because even in a lucid dream, reading text is virtually impossible by almost all accounts, right? You read something, you look away, you go back to read it again, and the words have changed. If you're lucky enough for the words to even be using real letters and making sense in like actual grammar, right? So that this bypasses both of those. Not only was he able to read real statements, but that he was able to look away and look again, and things kept their natural shape, which feels like a level beyond just lucid dreaming.
Yeah, I've experienced that too, where I go to read something, it says one thing, And then I look back, and it looked like, I remember this particular dream I had. It looked like the Mandalorian writing, in Star Wars, where it's like these weird symbols. It looked like that. And it was like kind of like moving around. So it was almost like water, like drops, and you couldn't read it. So, but again, this is Descartes, dude. He can do anything. He's a superhero.
He's rich, so he's got different rules that he
He's
lives
rich.
by. And that is one of the tips for lucid dreaming, is to look at text, look away, and look back at it. And if you notice that the text has changed, then you might be in a lucid dream. And that's one of the ways that you like wake yourself up in the dream without waking up in reality. And this one too, I kind of like Descartes for this part. And it says Descartes' belief that poets, even ones writing silly verses, all had something to say that was no less valuable than the works of philosophers. So, and then this also, that poem that he came across in his third dream, represented the yes and no of Pythagoras, that he understood to mean the truth and the falsehood in secular sciences. And this just makes me think that Rene Descartes would be on board with the Chosen One. He'd be like, look, even if you guys aren't solving the riddles of the universe through mathematics and geometry, it's still as valuable as what I'm doing. And I'd be like, I agree with you, Descartes. What we're doing, telling dick jokes and having like, crude humor, is as valuable as what you're doing.
Shout out to Descartes. Shout out to him.
Shout out to Descartes. He was a big fan. I actually sent him his copy earlier today. And then he said that he thought that the spirit in the dream, the one that gave him the book and then took it back away, was a genie, and that the genie had inserted these dreams into his head before he had even gone to bed, and that human elements had no effect on anything that followed. His dreams had been completely predetermined. That actually, man, this another wild tangent, but Descartes and these Lullian wheels and thought machines, they tie directly to Grant Morrison's The Invisibles comic series. And The Invisibles is named after the Rosicrucians. That's caused what they also named themselves. And there was this video game, Cyberpunk 2099, which was heavily influenced by The Invisibles. And one of these premises, not just in Cyberpunk 2099, but in a lot of like this cyberpunk culture, are these concepts that you can purchase thoughts and just kind of upload them into your head. And this almost seems like a futuristic version of what Descartes is describing here, that there's these genies that can plant thoughts and dreams inside your head. So when you go to sleep that night, you're just dreaming like a program that someone installed into your head previous to that. And this is like the transhumanist future, is that you just walk into a shop and you're like, give me that Cartesian coordinates and like, Platonic philosophy chip. You pop it into your head, and the next time you go to sleep, now you're dreaming things that weren't there before, and it's like a predetermined step. So I don't know, I think this is kind of a fascinating concept.
Sounds like a Black Mirror episode. Have you heard of Descartes' evil demon concept?
Tell me.
So he believed that there was so this is again very Matrix-like, where he believed that, right, the whole cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. He believed that your senses couldn't be trusted because it could be an evil demon that is influencing what you perceive as reality, or that you're a brain in a vat jar somewhere and an evil scientist is stimulating to believe your senses, right? So that's where the whole thing, well, the only thing that I can prove is that I'm a thinking thing. I think, therefore I am, right? So that's where that whole concept is very Gnostic in nature, where, the demiurge is controlling reality and we're in this false matrix, simulacra and simulation, that sort of thing. But yeah, he did have a concept which he called the evil demon. And when you read that just now, it made me think of that, where there's this demiurgic entity controlling all of reality. But if you think for yourself, then that means that you're not an NPC. But you have to be rich.
Right. You can't forget step one, bro. Step one's the most important step out of all these.
100%.
This part too, this was new to me, and I thought this was interesting, where one of the biggest puzzles that he came across that the book kind of implies that this was a driving force in everything that he was trying to do, was solve this doubling of Apollo's temple. And
Yeah.
the story goes that Athens in 427 BC, they were plagued, they were ravaged by this plague, and everyone was dying left and right. And they would go to the Oracle of Delphi and they'd be like, yo, ask Apollo what his deal is with us. Like, what's the beef, bro? Like, why do you keep like taking everybody out? And they respond and basically says, Apollo wants you to double the size of my temple. Like, if you guys can double the size of this temple, plague goes away. So they go to work and they double the width, they double the height, they double the length, and they come back and they're like, hey, the plague isn't here yet. So again, the Oracle goes in and she comes back out. She's like huffing glue or whatever it is that they do in there. And they just say, you have not followed Apollo's instructions. You have not doubled the size of God's temple as he demanded. Go back and do as he commanded you to do so. So, bro, this isn't just turning your homework into the teacher and having the teacher grade your work. You're like actually constructing a whole ass temple, going to an oracle. The oracle talks to God, and God comes back and tells you, not only did you not get your homework right, but now this plague is going to continue. More people are going to die because you didn't do your homework right. And all I was thinking is like, what if they had got it right? Does this mean the plague would have ended?
I mean, that's what it,
like how closely related are objective plagues that are killing people and math? Like, if they had just gotten the math right, would the plague have really ended? I want to think no, just because my Rockefeller I was born poor, so maybe I just don't understand the philosophy behind it. But it's almost implying that if they had got it right, then the plague would have ended.
I feel like I took this whole story as like almost like arguing with a flat earther when they ask you to present them a workable model, right? And then you give them the model, but they don't want to believe it because, you know, it's not right 100%. Like, no, make water stick to a ball. And you go, okay, whatever, dude. So it's you got to go back again. And yeah, I thought about that one, and how crazy would it have been if they did actually double? What was it? The what the hell did they call it? Not the actual size, because it was all about the inside of it, right?
The volume.
The volume, which wasn't as simple as doubling all of its dimensions, right, from the original ones. It's that was the whole problem. They couldn't solve it. And imagine if they would have got it right, would it have ended the plague? That's an interesting thing to think about.
I'm going to say no, but again, I was born poor, so you can't really trust anything that I say.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and they make the point that if you were to take a cube, and the whole problem here is that they were all thinking in two-dimensional space, that if you were to take a line and you double the size of that line, yeah, you've doubled it. But if you're talking about a three-dimensional cube, now you've got lines in three different dimensions, and if you double each of those, you've really quadrupled the size of the volume of the thing. And this is a much more difficult problem than it appears on the surface. And in fact, there was no mathematical formula that even existed at this time that would allow them to double a cube. This kind of cubic math just didn't exist. You could square things, you could operate in squares, and that's even enlightening in that when you square a number, right, it's got the little number 2 superscript above it. That just means you times the number by itself. That's a square, and a square is two-dimensional. If you cube a number, which has the little 3 in superscript, now you're talking about a three-dimensional representation of that. And at this point, three-dimensional math was not advanced enough for anyone to figure this problem out. So Apollo was kind of being a dick about this math problem.
Whoa, dude. That's can you imagine how defeated those guys must have felt? Like, they did all this work, they doubled everything, they took everything down, they quarried more stone, they put it into place, and they're like, all right, we're done. You didn't listen. It's not observable. Go back and do it again. It's like, damn.
And Apollo doesn't even tell you where you screwed up. He just says, nope, wrong. And that's all the feedback that you get.
Yep.
and all your friends and family die. Like that's that's the downside. You don't
That's
just get an F.
hardcore.
And then there's a couple notes of this like Polybius moniker that Descartes starts going by, and he even tells people, I'm going to start using this pseudonym to write about the things that might end up getting me in trouble with the Inquisition. And it makes me wonder on this too, if Descartes had not grown up in a time period where he was literally afraid for his life that the math he was working on could get him killed, would he have been better or worse? Like being forced to operate in secrecy, did that enhance his ability to think these things through, or did it hinder him? Like we'll never know because the reality is what it was. But imagine if every single teacher and priest and everyone that he came across was like, bro, you're killing it. You're doing such a great job. Just positive affirmations all the way. And there wasn't even a single person that's like, yo, bro, you're going to get yourself killed adding those numbers together like that.
Yeah, dude. Wild times that they were living in. I'm updating this thing here. Hold on one second. Update layout. Or how about now? How do we look? Can you see that?
Yeah. He also ended up making friends with another Christian Kabbalist who was reinterpreting Revelation, looking for the number 666 everywhere he could. This seems like a modern day gematria, where someone's just like, their thing is finding the number 666 and everything that they can look for it in. But this was a friend of Descartes. This was actually a smart person, not just a random YouTube schizo doing this, right? And there was like mathematical and philosophical reasons behind it. But I wonder what Descartes' true thoughts towards this guy trying to find 666 and everything really were.
Wasn't that Leibniz that stumbled across that, or was that actually Descartes that was
the
doing
sign
that?
of Jupiter?
No, the 666 stuff. I thought that was Leibniz that stumbled across that.
Well, he found it, but the guy that was doing it was this Fallhaber. I think that's how you pronounce it. Which was one of Descartes' homies, this Fallhaber guy, and he's the one that was making it a point to find this number 666 and everything that he did.
Was he the one that was in the Invisibles? No, I'm serious. There was a guy.
I was thinking the comic book. I was like, I don't know.
No, he was. There was a guy he was hanging out with that was like a mathematical mystic, and he was.
Well, I assume that all of the people that Descartes runs into that end up connecting him to other people, that they're all in the Rosicrucians. But understandably, the Rosicrucians seem like they were at least half decent at protecting their identities, because it's not like they had these obvious records that you could just look up and be like, oh yeah, this guy was definitely a member of the Rosicrucians. Even throughout the course of this book, it heavily implies that Descartes was a member of the Invisible College, but he himself denied it for his entire life. And the only way that you can actually prove that he was in the Rosicrucians is just by pointing to the information that he was sharing, some of the phrases they would use. For example, the word curious and curiosity. This book implies that was almost a Rosicrucian term, that if you mention something as a curiosity, it specifically was talking about occult topics, like mystical, metaphysical ideas. It wasn't just I'm curious about that, or that's a curiosity, that it specifically meant kind of like dark arts.
Yeah, and the formidable arts or something like that. There was like other language that he was using, but Leibniz found in one of his notebooks FRC, which is the whole
Frater Christian Rosenkreutz.
No, hold on.
That's the FRC or Fraternia.
Yes.
Rosecrux. Same thing though, because the whole person being Christian Rosenkreutz is also debated if that guy ever existed or if that was just always meant to be an anagram for the Invisible College.
Yes. Yeah. So,
and then go ahead.
There are a couple things that again line up, and when he was writing about the rumors of him being associated with this society, he never said no. He never denied it, right? So maybe he was a part of it, and he didn't admit it for good reason, because he would have been killed. Like, he would have been, again, labeled XYZ, whatever it was. I mean, secret societies were also not popular back then either. Like, they weren't looked upon. The church wasn't there a pope that put out some law that ruled against secret societies?
Yeah, well, I mean, a number of papal bulls were passed for suppressing all these secret societies. So there was, in like 100 years after this, is basically when the Bavarian Illuminati comes in, and they also find themselves. You've got this like three-way battle against the Jesuits, the Rosicrucians, and then at that time the Illuminati, because they all represent different things. The Rosicrucians still have a religious underpinning to them, right? You can be a Jesuit and be a Rosicrucian, even if the Jesuits tell you not to. The same way that you can be a Freemason and a Roman Catholic, even if the Roman Catholics tell you not to. They're not incompatible both ways. They're only incompatible one way.
Yeah.
Whereas the Bavarian Illuminati, they were more like deists, almost bordering on atheists, which made them the enemy of both the Rosicrucians and of the Jesuits for different reasons.
Yeah. So again, I think that if he would have come out and talked about it, he would have been not in good shape, bro.
Well, there would be no upside unless you were just trying to brag about it, but there's really no reason that you would tell someone, hey, I'm a Rosicrucian. It would just make people go after you. It wouldn't give you any kind of benefit. You don't get like a free coffee at Dunkin' Donuts if you tell them you're Rosicrucian. Or maybe you do. Maybe we try that next time you go to McDonald's and you order. You're like, hey, by the way, yeah, I'm a Rosicrucian. I'm an invisible. Are you an invisible?
Sir, that'll be $2.99, please. Like, damn it, didn't work.
And it lists the 6 rules of Rosicrucians, which just seem interesting enough to point out here.
Number 1, be rich.
Right. Well, no, you have those 3 come before you're even allowed into the Rosicrucians. Okay. So I guess that there's 9 rules. The first 3 are unspoken: be rich, sleep in, and teach yourself. And then the next 6, one is they must heal and distribute free medicine to all people who need them. 2, they must dress in accordance with the customs of the country in which they live, which I would consider like crypto Rosicrucianism, right? This is like play the part, blend in. 3, they must meet once every year. 4, they must choose a successor so that all of them will be replaced once they die. 5, each must carry a hidden seal with the letters RC. So I guess this would be a way to tell if someone was a Rosicrucian. If they die and you find this RC seal on them, then that's a good indication of that.
Well,
and then the last one is they must keep their society secret for at least 100 years.
Dude, Rene Descartes is an RC right there, bro. I mean, that's the mantle. That's his RC.
Remote control cars are also Rosicrucian then too, right?
Hey,
RC Cola is actually a Rosicrucian beverage.
Dude, I'm telling you, it goes deep.
Okay, here's where it starts. Descartes hires a small boat to take him to the West Frisians, where he wants to visit a number of specific places otherwise not accessible. And according to Ballet, this move could have been fatal for him, and it nearly was. And we're going to get into this right now. So he hires a group of, I'm going to say pirates. He basically just hires like some rowdy-ass pirates, and he's like, hey, take me and my fancy-ass suit and my servants and my treasure chests full of crap that you're probably interested within these. Bring me to like this remote, secluded island, and I'm just going to trust you guys aren't going to do anything weird on the way there. So, and at this point, I guess it's worth noting that Descartes had taught himself how to speak German, how to speak Dutch, even how to speak Gaelic, like all these different, not just languages, but vernaculars within these different languages.
As one would, being rich and sleeping.
As one would. So, as he gets onto this boat, everyone's talking smack about him. They're like, look at this idiot with his frilly pom-pom,
his little sword.
Yeah, his little sword and his feather and his little cap. They're just nonstop talking smack about him. They also began to talk about a plan to throw him and his valet overboard and make off with his money. And Descartes is playing it super cool this entire time. He just is like looking around, pretending like he has no idea what they're saying, until they actually mention that they're going to go through and try and kill him. But as soon as he hears this, he jumps into action and he whips out his little sword and he basically like threatens to slice them up, even though this is one dude wearing a feather with pom-pom frilly, like he's dressed up like freaking Yankee Doodle, right? Like a member of the Macaroni tribe. But I guess him just doing this takes all the pirates by surprise. They're like, whoa, and they back off, and then they embrace him, and they're like, all right, we're not going to throw you overboard. All that money that we were going to steal from you, you can keep it, because now we're afraid of you, this one person and your little sword. The entire boat of pirates backs off. Like my BS detector was just like ringing so loud when I was reading through this. Like what would they care? Like he brings out the sword, then someone just hits him over the head and they push him overboard and they steal his stuff. Like, right? Book over.
Yeah. Well, again, it's painting Descartes in this light of like being like a superhero in a sort of. But think about it, bro. Like if you were rich, rule number one, wouldn't you want your legacy to be like, hey, I was a bad bro, I went to Vegas, I went to Paris. I was winning all the slot machines. I was counting the cards. I was a rock star, dude. I was, getting bitches, acquiring currency and getting ladies or whatever you want to call them, right? Like living up to the hype. And I think that this story, and I don't know if this story has to do with his mechanical daughter and the doll. Did you ever hear about that?
No, mechanical daughter.
Yeah. So after Francine had died, his daughter, his only daughter, essentially, he had, he was obsessed with her. He loved her very dearly, and he loved her so much that he actually created this automata, like this doll, this mechanical doll that talked on its own and moved around on its own, and he kept it in a chest with him wherever he went. And there's a story about him where he took it on this boat with these kind of pirate-like guys, and at night they kept hearing like talking coming from his cabin, and they're like, yo, what the hell is this guy doing? This guy doing some necromancy or something. And while he was asleep, they busted into his cabin and opened up the chest, and they saw this talking doll, and they're like, yo, this is witchcraft, this is voodoo. They took it and they threw it overboard, right? So there's this, again, this lure of him being some sort of necromancer, because allegedly he liked to create little models and little trinkets of things. How true is that? We don't know. But again, it's just another aspect of Descartes and his obsession with mechanical things, if you will.
Well, let's just call it what it is. He invented the first sex doll. We don't have to pretend that it was for some like.
But it was his daughter, bro. That's dark.
He was a weird guy. He was a Jesuit. What do you expect? There was a note in the book too, just a real brief one, but that this battle between Cardano and Tartaglia, and I don't want to get too much on a tangent on all this, except for this point that Tartaglia actually divulged this secret formula, and he did so by encoding the math into a poem, and this poem was able to be spread around so that only those with eyes to see it could read this poem and be like, yo, this guy just dropped some major mathematical knowledge on us. And again, this gives credit to this whole conspiratorial feeling of that, you're watching the latest Kate Perry like music video or something, and you're like, oh my God, she's encoding the mysteries of the universe. There is historical precedent that people have been doing this since forever.
Yeah, and it makes you think all the poems that Crowley wrote that are very crude, right? White Stains and all these other poems that he wrote, where was he encoding some secret knowledge in those, or was it all just for shock or for whatever he was trying to do? Right? Because according to Descartes, anyone who writes poetry has some truth to tell that's just as important as the real truth itself, right? I mean, that's according to him. And Crowley was rich, so he already has step one. What was
I
step?
would love to show Kodak. I would love to show Descartes like some Kodak Black lyrics, like Lil Wayne lyrics, and then have him like stand next to his statement that all poetry. Maybe it is. Maybe like a Kodak Black song, or hell, like Glorilla. Maybe he hears like a Glorilla song, and he's like, "Oh my God, she's encoding all of the secrets of the universe in this song."
Our thoughts are not our own, bro. Right?
He was also, this is kind of a pretty major line. He's a playboy, he's rich, you know, he's a short king, so maybe it was a little bit harder on that front for him. He could probably afford platform shoes just the same way as he could afford to pay a bunch of pirates to say that he fended them off with a sword, right? He had that kind of money. But he runs into this chick that he's enamored with. But as soon as it gets to a certain point, he straight up tells her, "Your beauty is unmatched, but I love truth the most." So this is his way of being like, I don't got time for all that. Like, I got math to do. I got geometry to do.
Yeah, at least he was keeping it real, bro.
He's like, I got to go back into this room with all my bros.
I
and we're
gotta
gonna
go
talk math
study.
for 40
Get off me, bro.
And okay, here's some hot fire that he spits, right? So he gets into a whole bunch of correspondences with different people throughout the course of his life. They see him solving these problems, and then he notices people kind of lifting his work and stealing his answers and passing it off as their own. And he's this rich gentleman, so he's like has the utmost like polite responses to people. But this is one of these responses that he writes to someone, and he says, this is him writing to Beekman. Beekman's the guy that introduced him to one of these puzzles that eventually gets him invited into the Rosicrucians, I believe, in like a non-direct way. But he says that, and Beekman's one of these guys that goes out and he's like, "Yeah, I solved this problem." And Descartes sitting back like, "Wait a minute, bro, you didn't solve that problem. That was me. You're just
stole it.
taking my answer. He stole from me." So he writes to Beekman and he says, "Now that I know that you are more interested in silly boasting than in true friendship and truth, let me tell you some things. Undoubtedly, you were led to err by the politeness of our French language, when, be it in conversation, be it by letter, I have affirmed that I had learned many things from you." So this is his way of being like, "Yo, I was just trying to be nice, bro. I was just saying that I learned something from you to be polite, but really you're an idiot and I couldn't have learned anything from you."
Well, to give some context to that, before that, this Beekman guy had told somebody else, and I believe it was Beekman that was this intermediary with his letters and everything and all his possessions and all that stuff. So he saw things of Descartes, and I believe it was that he had told somebody like, "Yeah, Descartes, I taught him all the stuff that he knows. All the stuff that he came up with was because of me." And that's when when somebody had told Descartes was like, "Yo, you really said that? Let me get on him." And that's when he's like, "Give me all my stuff back," and then the rest is history. But yeah, they were accusing.
"I want back my Pokemon deck. I want back all those books I lent to you.
Yeah,
I think I left like a sweatshirt over your house.
Give me back my Roadcaster." You know,
my Roadcaster. It says later on in life, Descartes switches to being a vegan. He ate almost vegetables and fruits entirely, avoiding meat, when he was about 47.
That was his downfall.
Are you ready to convert to vegetarianism when you're 47?
No.
What an interesting number to highlight too.
Yeah, Euclid's 47th proposition, right? The whole, even the Freemasons use 47 too. Isn't that part of it all?
Well, the 47 the Masons use is literally from the 47th proposition of Euclid, which is just another name for the Pythagorean theorem. Yeah. And then it said, okay, here's the part. This is the number 2, the second thing that I relate to the most. And this is what I fell in love with the Voyage to Cartesius, even if it was satirical. I'm not sure if I believe that. But it says that Descartes was led to this concept of doubt and his decision to, quote, doubt everything that he could not ascertain as true.
Yeah.
And this is what diverged from classical, medieval, scholastic philosophy, which basically held that there were three states of truthfulness in everything that was either false, probable, or true. And Descartes was like, nah, son, there's no such thing as probable. It's either true or it's not true. And don't give me this like maybe crap, because that is not like objective. And then he figured, okay, well, if there can only be true or false, I can't just assume everything is true and then disprove everything. So now he adopts this mentality that everything is false unless he can prove everything is true. And this is maybe like almost like a flat earther kind of mentality if you stay here forever, right?
It's observable. Yeah.
And yeah, okay, show me the curve. And then Descartes, in the Voyage to Cartesius, this is where they kind of imply that he says, if I look out and I see something, I can't even trust that that thing is there, because it could just be my optic nerves
It's a demon.
vibrating,
Yeah.
making me see this thing. I can't trust my senses, because my senses are just trying to like represent something that's happening outside my body. And since I can't trust all that, this is what starts his entire premise of everything is false until I prove it's true. And then it says that embracing purely mathematical methods of obtaining knowledge, Descartes does away with probable and assumes falsity of everything he cannot prove with logical power analogs used in demonstration of geometry. So he's kind of using math and geometry as the only thing that can prove whether or not something is true.
Again, the evil demon concept, right? Where 1641 Meditations on the First Philosophy, Descartes imagines that a malevolent god or an evil demon of utmost power and cunning has employed all his energies in order to deceive me. This malevolent god or demon is imagined to present a complete illusion of the external world, so that Descartes can say, I shall think the sky, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things are merely the delusions of dreams which he has devised to ensnare my judgment. I shall consider myself as not having hands or eyes or flesh or blood or senses, but as falsely believing that I have all these things. So again, he is trying to either you're fake or you're gay. There's no fake and gay, because then that's it's not provable, bro. It's not observable.
I honestly love this so much. This concept of like demons are just trying to trick you constantly, and you can't trust any of it.
Well,
And
the 24-hour sun in Antarctica is actually Satan, bro. It's Lucifer shining. Seriously, there's one that said that.
From Descartes?
No, there's a flat earther pastor that said that.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, they say a lot of things. Is he rich though? Is he rich?
I don't know if he's rich, but
Or was he born rich? I think is more important.
I don't know. Maybe.
Descartes ends up coming up with these 4 rules based on this thought, and this is what leads him into like the I think therefore I am stuff. The 4 rules: 1, to accept as true only that which cannot be doubted. That one's really important. 2, divide every problem into as many parts as would be necessary in order to solve it correctly. That's actually great advice for anyone that doesn't already do that. 3, to order his thoughts from the simplest to the most complicated. So not only are you going to take any problem you come across, break it into manageable chunks, but then you focus on the easiest to solve chunks and then work your way up to the more complex versions. And then 4, enumerate all concepts so that nothing pertinent is omitted. In other words, every time you think of something and make a decision, you write down all the factors that went into that decision, all the variables. Like this is kind of leading to his renovation of math and algebra and calculus and everything combined, of labeling the things that he's observing. Because back then, people would just draw the shapes and then draw the lines, then derive it from that. And he was like, wait a minute, what if we wrote a number on this graph? And everyone's like, oh my God, burn this guy at the stake. He wants to write a number on top of that circle over there. But this all came from his initial consideration to doubt everything until he could prove it. And then this is where I think therefore I am comes in, and it gives it more context. And it said, what can Descartes prove? everything is taken to be false. But Descartes, the person, is doing the doubting. So one thing can be deduced as true, that Descartes exists, otherwise he could not doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, the negation of everything, a proof is derived that the existence of the person doing the doubting. And this is, I think, therefore I am, which you mentioned also kind of bites him in the ass later on, because someone comes up and like, wait a minute, Descartes is saying to doubt everything, even God, even the church, right? And this was like, whoever thought this, I'm guarantee you Descartes saw this challenge and he was like, you mother, like you smart son of a, you know what I mean? Like, he got him, bro. He took his own logic and he used it against them to prove heresy in such a convincing way.
Where he had to quite literally defend himself from it. That's wild, dude.
This is another observation that I like, and any flurfers out there, hold your applause. To Descartes, space is infinite, and the infinite is God. So Descartes' idea of God was just a concept of infinity, like a mathematical concept of infinity, and that this was what he considered to be divine, because infinity also includes perfection. And since no human can actually obtain perfection, yet perfection exists as a concept, then it has to represent the divine. It has to represent God. And that's kind of the logic that he put together. And it seems like it kind of checks out. I kind of like that line of thinking.
Well, and that also kind of plays into the whole Pythagorean thought of things, where God is number, right? Divinity is number. And so that's why they worship number, because, again, how you're saying, you have to find this perfectness in order to achieve infinity. Therefore, deity would be numerical in nature, kind of, sort of, right? I mean, endless in all directions, alpha and omega, first and last. But yeah, that's the way I see that with the Pythagoreans. I think they were also onto something.
Beans. They're on beans. Descartes, this is another, like, such a cool personality quirk. Again, you have to be rich in order to do this part. But everyone was asking him, like, bro, you're so smart, you're coming up with these mathematical theorems, you're solving these puzzles. If you were just a teacher, if you were just join the faculty at some college and start spreading your knowledge, we could elevate the consciousness of the entire planet, right? Europe at the very least, but the entire planet could now take these quantum leaps in knowledge, and we could solve the world's problems. And Descartes was like, yeah, but I don't want to deal with people. This is exactly how the book says it. It says, Descartes did not assume a faculty position at universities because he valued his freedom to the degree that he would not have wanted to meet people on a regular basis, students and faculty alike, as required by professors. So he's like, I know that I could
them kids, man.
Yeah, bro. I don't want to be held down. I don't want to have to show up at 5 a.m. or deal with some like PTA conference. So you know what? No, I'm not going to be a teacher because it would be inconvenient to me. I don't like dealing with people. And again, I can relate to this, right? It's like, I don't want to do a podcast today. I want to deal with anybody.
Same. I feel like that sometimes too, bro. It's okay.
Yeah, the guy, this is the quote, the guy using his own logic against him. Since the hallmark of Descartes' philosophy is doubt, Voidius was able to manipulate that and argue that doubt leads to doubts about the existence of gods, hence atheism. Props to this dude for being like the ultimate troll and drawing Descartes out of hiding in order to like disprove this.
I love that.
We're getting close to the end here because he's gonna die pretty soon. Spoiler alert. Here's a quote that says that Descartes wrote the following curious passage, and now whenever I see Descartes writing something curious, it makes me think this is like Rosicrucian related, right?
Yeah.
But in this letter that he wrote, it said that the savages imagined that monkeys could speak if they wanted to, but they chose not to, lest they be forced to work. And since I had not the same prudence to abstain from writing, I now have neither as much leisure nor as much peace as I would like to if I had kept quiet. So he even says Later on in life, he's like, I wish I never would have told anyone. I never would have solved these problems. Like, he wanted to just keep it all for himself. He was so dedicated to finding the solutions of the universe. He didn't even want other people to know this, which is evidenced by all the writings that he never released, by the secret notebook that he didn't release to anyone. He didn't even tell anybody about these things because he truly cared about it just for the knowledge itself. He didn't care about the accolades or the bragging rights or any of that stuff.
What a selfish asshole.
Right? I kind of have two minds on that. He doesn't want to teach people. He doesn't even want to share his notes or talk about it. And it's just because it was bothersome to him. He was annoyed by other people. So he'd rather just keep the secrets of the universe to himself.
I'm just going to podcast from now on, record it, and never put it out. That's what I'm going to do from now on. I don't want anybody to know about the research I'm doing anymore. So this is actually going to be the last episode I ever put out because you guys will never know what I'm researching or what I'm reading. So hopefully you're ready for that, Thomas.
Okay, so I am ready for that. I think we should start with this episode. We're not even going to release this episode.
All right, people will never know about this. It might be leaked. It'll be leaked by somebody.
Although there is one sense where Descartes kind of like he travels masked, right? Isn't that what his phrase is? Like, everywhere I go masked. Well, he gets unmasked here a little bit, and that's as he's jumping around country to country. He ends up in Holland at some point, and the reason that he ends up in Holland with the Dutch is more in that no one's there that he is aware of. No one's trying to kill him yet, and he doesn't necessarily like it there. He doesn't think that he's surrounded by anyone that's particularly special. He didn't go there for a girl. He just went there because he felt like he was at a safe distance to go and do his math. But he ends up getting pulled into other directions, Sweden ultimately, and it was because he had the chance to be directly associated with this like high form of royalty. So he had a little bit of an ego that needed to be stroked here and put his name in the history books. One of the comparisons was how Aristotle was a tutor to Alexander the Great. So if Descartes wants to live up to that same sort of measure, then he also has to find royalty in order to tutor. And this is kind of what leads him to die, right? If it hadn't been his ego wanting to be associated with royalty and power, then he might still be alive today, Juan.
Yeah, it says right there, in Holland, Descartes was free. He could wake up late in the morning after sleeping his usual 10 hours a night and lazily read in bed for as long as he wanted. Damn, this guy was living the dream, dude.
Right. He lived in comfortable surroundings in a small town in the countryside, walks in nature, fresh farm food, not too far away from major cities, good libraries, intellectuals, friends. So he was kind of living life here, even though he claims that it wasn't for any specific purpose. But then finally, he decides that he is going to go to Sweden. He gets called to Sweden
By Christina of Sweden, yeah.
to be a mentor of Queen Christina. And this is where it all goes wrong. If he hadn't made this move, who knows what would have happened.
We're not going to touch on Queen Elizabeth?
You can touch Queen Elizabeth all you want.
No, on the Descartes and Queen Elizabeth relationship.
Go for it.
So, he was, before Christina of Sweden, he was tutoring this other girl, Queen Elizabeth, which apparently she was this young woman who wanted to learn from him because back then he was kind of known, right? He was like a rock star. People knew about him. People knew he was super smart, blah, blah, blah. So these people were so bald. They're like, I want to learn philosophy and mathematics and all these things from Descartes himself. So they would call him up. And he ended up getting involved with this Queen Elizabeth, which I don't know how old was she? Queen Elizabeth.
It's probably going to be problematic if I have to guess.
Yeah. Because I think she was 24. I think she was, because it said that she was half his age and he was 40 something.
Yeah, right. He was in his late 40s and she was in her early 20s.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's not that bad, but apparently, so he was teaching her. They wrote correspondences back and forth after he had left. And there seemed to be something more than meets the eye as far as their relationship would go. and I think they called it like the Rene Descartes essence. Like people would fall in love with him or something or other, right? Like something weird. But anyways, he ended up after the fact, after teaching her, he had to leave, and when he left, she was writing notes back and forth, but a lot of them were tame. There wasn't anything weird about them because the hands that they exchanged were in her family, right? So she would give it to her younger sister, and she would, pass it on so they could read it. But there was a particular set of letters that apparently have been lost, right? Of course. And there is one in particular where in another letter after the fact, she had referenced burning the previous letter to that. So they're hinting at this sort of romantic connection with this Queen Elizabeth at the time. So again, the Rene Descartes riz, where he was risen up these princesses, right? And apparently when he went to Christina, there was a little bit of jealousy that he had to like sort of explain himself to Queen Elizabeth, that he had found what he called, she's the perfect student. She's hungry. He says she has a lot of stamina. She wakes me up at 5 a.m. to study, and she can keep going and going and going into the, late hours of the afternoon or whatever it was. So there was like something really weird going on with Descartes and these younger women where
he's writing to Elizabeth and he's like, look, I don't want you to get jealous.
Yes.
This new chick, she keeps me on my toe. She is thirsty for my knowledge and she swallows it. Like, so we don't have anything that like I've got with Christina going on here. And one of the letters is even like, I hope you won't get jealous over this or something to that effect, meaning that like he knew what was going on. He understood what kind of little love triangle that he was stirring up here.
Yeah, so apparently, again, there was speculation that it could have been romantic in some sort of nature, the relationship he had with at least Queen Elizabeth, or not Queen Elizabeth, but Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia. So
isn't that crazy too that Princess Elizabeth couldn't trust her messengers or her family, because they had the little wax seals, right, where you could like seal the papers so that if it were taken apart you could tell, like a tamper-proof seal.
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't trust that to make it through all the hands and get to the car, so they had to keep all of like the sexting to a minimum, essentially.
Sexting, yeah. Pretty much.
So yeah, so he's showing that riz to like all these ladies he comes across, Princess Elizabeth, and then finally to this Queen Sophia, who asked him to come to Stockholm and do the same thing. I want you to mentor me. And it legitimately sounds like she was incredibly smart. She was like a tomboy.
Yeah.
She was into fencing and hunting and like all of the things that only guys were supposed to do. She did, including philosophy and math. So she
was into alchemy. She was into the occult, bro. She was into all that sort of stuff.
She was the perfect girl. Like Princess Elizabeth just couldn't compete.
And got on Christina. So
yeah, what Queen Sophia had going. Except Queen Sophia lived in a literal ice hell, right? It was like, and not only that, but the year that he decides to go to Stockholm was like the coldest year on record in his entire lifetime. So he picks the absolute worst time to go there, and he goes from this nice countryside with sunshine and grass, and immediately goes into this like frozen ice prison. And I imagine probably sends him into like a little bit of a weather depression too. Like they don't cite that in this book, but anyone that's traveled around and you go from like a nice warm tropical climate with lots of sun, and now all of a sudden you're in a place that has no sunlight and it's freezing cold, and there's like no green anywhere, that it does have like a mental effect on you. So it changes entire personality.
It reminds me of the Game of Thrones when they get stationed at the wall in the north and it's all cold and miserable for them.
So here's the downfall. And this part, I mean, I had read this before, but this book does such a great job of telling his biography as like an actual story that you want to keep reading.
Yes.
So Descartes, here he is in Stockholm. It's ice cold here. There's no sun anywhere. He's got to wake up at 5 a.m. He can't sleep in as late as he wants to and do his own thing. So his life has changed drastically. And I feel like we can't discount that he's also a vegetarian at this point too. which maybe didn't help this equation, but they leave that part out. And it says he gets there and he immediately falls ill. The day that Descartes fell ill, Dr. Dwyer, which was this trusted physician that he was homies with, like they were on the same page, he was far away from Stockholm on a mission on behalf of the Queen and not expected back soon. So, since Dr. Dwyer was not there, the Queen sends for her second doctor, who's a Dutch physician by the name of Woels. And Woels was a, quote, sworn enemy of Descartes since the time the war that the ministers and theologians had declared upon him. So this was back when he was in Holland. He had made lots of enemies because of his philosophy and his religion. Again, that he thought he was this Catholic escaping the Inquisition, but he runs away into the heartland of Protestantism. And now the Protestants are like, let's get this Catholic guy out of here. It's so wild, right? He's concerned the Catholics are going to think he's atheist, so he hides among the Protestants. And he's like, the Protestants won't care I'm atheist. They didn't think he was an atheist. They thought he was a Catholic, and he was. And that turned into this. So anyways, he's here in Stockholm. He falls ill. The doctor that is on his homie is not anywhere around, and they bring in the second doctor. My conspiratorial mind is like, this sounds like the 9/11 NORAD stand-down order. This is when they scrambled the fighter jets to the northern Canada and to Alaska so that when something went down, they couldn't call on these fighter jets to take out the plane, right? This is the Queen sending away the people that could have helped at the exact moment when he needed help.
I don't think she would have done that to him. You think she would have done that to him?
Maybe not her in particular, but who knows? It says that the Queen had basically sent this doctor away, but it was on a mission on behalf of the Queen. Who's to say that one of the doctors, with this second Dutch doctor, did something in order to get the Queen to send that doctor away so that these next steps could kind of fall into place? I'll at least say that the death of Descartes sounds like it was an inside job in a bunch of different ways.
Because he would have still been alive today, 100%.
He never would have died. And then it says that Woels, who was the second doctor, had been allied with an anti-Cartesian elements in Dutch academia and was wanting to, quote, see Descartes dead. This man had, quote, put into use all he had judged as capable of harming Descartes. So here we've got the doctor that hates you. Like, you've got a doctor that's supposed to save your life now, and he is on record as wanting you to be dead and using everything at his disposal to basically harm you. And this is the guy that's in charge of saving your life.
And he had also been told that Descartes made a comment about him, which he didn't take well. I believe there was also in there. So this guy definitely has a bone to pick with Descartes, and he might have poisoned him.
Well, yeah, could you imagine, like, you're a doctor, you've like worked your whole life to get up to this rank, and they bring in this like fancy pants dude wearing a blue blouse with pom-poms on it, and this dude starts critiquing you and criticizing you, like, oh, you're doing that wrong. Oh, that's not how you do that. I could see being rubbed the wrong way by Descartes, especially since by all accounts, Descartes was antisocial. He was almost misanthropic, meaning that like he had disdain for people in general. And that probably was not easy for him to hide because he wasn't like this social butterfly, right? So if you were annoying Descartes, it probably was not something that you did not also detect. You'd be like, man, this guy's being a dick to me right now. And then it says, as soon as the second doctor arrived at Descartes' bedside, he decided to bleed his patient. And this is because all doctors, that was what they went to. They show up and they're like, oh, you've got a stubbed toe, we're gonna bleed you. Oh, you've got a weird cough, we're gonna bleed you. Like, no matter what your problem was, they were gonna bleed you. And Descartes said that the philosopher had spent time over the preceding decades to study anatomy and knew one thing that most contemporaries didn't help with anything. It can only cause. YouTube censors, don't ding us for this. We're just stating.
I'm gonna censor it.
Yeah, go ahead and censor that. It doesn't help with anything. We never know. we're gonna get hit for like medical for
Right,
going against
from the
medieval.
from the 16th and 17th century, right? Medical message. Here's where you said it in your video, and here's why we're demonetizing you permanently.
And here's what you just mentioned. It said, someone apparently told the Dutch doctor what Descartes had said about him, and he took it badly
Yeah.
and made him hate Descartes even more than he had until then. So, bro, there's someone that's just like spreading rumors and gossip. They're just trying to stir the
Bro.
pot. Like, yo, Doc, you know what Descartes just said about you, bro?
This
You gonna
dude's
stand
talking
for that?
hellish about
You
you,
gonna
bro.
say that?
He's talking hellish right now. He said that doesn't solve, bro. And the guy's like, oh, I hate this Descartes guy. You know, I just want to punch him in the head, and then
Or worse.
he poisoned him.
So, okay, well, here's the big ending. Here's the big climax to this particular thread. So that evening, Wolves made a prognosis that the patient would die. That would kind of suck. You're in the other room and you hear your doctor just telling everyone like, "Oh yeah, he's gonna die," and then he comes back in and he's like, "Oh no, you'll be fine. We just got to bleed you some more." So okay, I'm gonna read this part in whole because this is kind of the whole entire ending of his life. In the morning, after Descartes says, "No, you're not going to bleed me. I'm gonna tough this out. If I can just get some good sleep and rest, if I can get my 10 hours of sleep that I'm used to and not wake up at 5 a.m. to teach this stupid queen about math, then I'll heal myself." So in the morning, Descartes felt surprisingly well. His fever had gone down and had left his head so that reason could return. This is in quotes. He sat up in bed and read. He ate bread. He drank water. He told everyone gathered around him that he was feeling well and that the illness had now taken its full course. He asked to drink alcohol flavored with tobacco. And there's a subtext in here that the author is implying that drinking alcohol mixed with tobacco might have been something to induce vomiting just so that Descartes could like keep on his path to wellness here. So Dr. Wool's judgment was that the concoction would be fatal to anyone in Descartes' condition. So here's the guy that's been talking smack about you, just proved you wrong, right? He was like, "You're not going to bleed me. I'll be fine." He wakes up the next morning and he's fine. And the doctor is so pissed off right now. He's like, "This guy is showing me up. He's like disproving everything that I'm saying. He's just like arguing with me every step of the way. Now he's asking for alcohol and tobacco. Like, what's this guy doing? This is poison. You're asking me to bring you poison. Wait, you're asking me to bring you poison." So he gets this thought in his head. And he's like, "Okay, if you really want this poison you're asking for." The doctor said at this stage, anything would be permitted to Descartes. So he left the room and returned with a glass filled with dark liquid that smelled of alcohol and tobacco and gave it to Descartes. The next morning, Descartes' health had taken a sharp turn for the worse. He was now throwing up blood and blackish fluid. Phlegm came out of his mouth. He was in agony. By 8 a.m., Descartes was weak and about to abandon hope and finally gave up resistance and allowed the doctor to bleed him. Very little blood came out, so after an hour, the doctor bled him again. And then eventually, Descartes' condition keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and he dies. So here we've got Descartes arguing with his doctor that already hates him. The doctor hears Descartes talking smack about him, hates him even more. Then he tells him, "I'm not going to do what you're telling me to do. You're not going to bleed me, and I'll be fine." And then he is fine. This doctor couldn't have been any more angry at Descartes at this point. So when Descartes' like, "Go get me a drink, you fool," the guy comes back, and I guess the premise here is that he doesn't bring him just alcohol and tobacco. He brings him alcohol, tobacco, and poison, which cause him to violently throw up blood and black liquid. Yeah, a little salt bay. He throws a little arsenic in the mix.
Mercury and arsenic, and just go ahead and swirl it all around.
And his last words are, "Ah, my dear Schluter, this is the time I must leave." So he realized like the exact moment of his death. He saw the astral spirit coming back down to show him some more vortices, and he's like, "I'm gonna go on this one last trip."
I'll catch you guys on another planet. Wasn't the black drink part of Descartes' A Voyage to the World of Cartesius?
Well, they talked about a snuff that he used, like a certain type of tobacco mixture that
Mm,
he would insufflate, meaning he snorted it. Um,
mm.
so so Descartes probably was familiar with lots of different properties of tobacco and other drugs. Yeah, but yeah, this doctor is mad suspect. He leaves the room, comes back with a liquid, he drinks it, and then immediately gets sick from it. I mean, we'll never really be able to know, but I did ask AI, and AI agreed that it sounds like he was poisoned.
Of
And it
course.
wasn't just because the doctor hated him, which he did, but the real reason was because there were these Protestants and all the like Descartes was the only guy in Queen Sophia's entire council that was Catholic, right? And everyone was afraid that he was going to convert her to become a Catholic. And after he dies, she does convert to Catholicism. So all of their fears were kind of justified. And I wonder too, this is not spoken in the book, but I wonder if the queen knew that this had happened, that he was poisoned, and uses this as like, you know what, these Protestants are bad news. I'm going to go to the one true religion, Roman Catholicism.
You keep saying Sophia. Who's Sophia? Is it Christina?
Or Christina, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. So don't want to spread fake news, but apparently,
Go back and edit all that. Well, we're not going to release this to the public anyways.
yeah, it
so.
doesn't matter. Yeah, it's fine. Apparently, there's talks that she was a lesbian.
Well, I mean, she was a tomboy, right?
Yeah.
Years after Descartes' death on October 2nd, 1666, his body was exhumed and the remains, apparently without the skull, were repatriated. And this goes into, I sent you this link. I had never even heard of it. Have you heard of the concept of skull blasting before this?
No, I've heard the concept of skull.
Well, okay, go ahead and edit that out too. But so skull blasting is actually an interesting practice, and what they would do, they call it skull blasting because they would take a dead person's, hopefully a dead person's skull, they didn't do it while you were living, and they would pack it full of dried rice or dried beans or dried peas or something, and just press it in there, and then they would soak it in water. So as the rice or the beans would slowly expand from absorbing the water, it would cause the skull to fracture. And in some cases, I assume it would just like explode outright. The amount of pressure building up inside would cause it to explode, which lends credit to this term of skull blasting. That skull blasting is making the skull sort of shatter so that it was easier to take chunks and sell them out on the market. So you could be like, hey, you like Descartes, right? You want to own a piece of his skull? Hey, $14.99 at paranoidamerican.com right now. Use promo code skull blasting. And this was basically when they exhumed Descartes' remains, his skull's not there. So then they go on the hunt for Descartes' skull. And this guy claims that he found it on the market in an auction, and he buys it from the auction and then returns the skull back to Descartes' skeleton. And I looked into this a little bit. Apparently, there's a lot of debate over whether that skull was actually Descartes' skull or not. This guy might have been swindled to just pay a bunch of money for something that was just like a random person's skull.
Point is, where the hell's his skull?
I mean, it seems like it would be in pieces.
Oh, but I'm saying like maybe this guy got swindled or whatever, but still like his skull is missing. So somebody
Like
took
where's
it.
the real one?
Maybe the Rosicrucians took it, similar to like Skull and Bones and all these other things and that's what also adds to the concept of maybe Descartes being a sort of sorcerer or wizard, because usually when you take somebody's member, like Bonaparte's penis. Have you heard of Bonaparte's penis? I'm spreading awareness on Bonaparte's penis. Have you heard about that?
Go for it. Sounds like a mouthful.
Well, it's a little bit, but apparently there's this family that owns Bonaparte's penis, and they have it. It's like dried out and stuff like that. So
what kind of flex is that?
I mean, it's a weird flex because the same guy that owned it. No. Check this out, bro. Because the same guy that owned it, I just did an episode on this with Mark. Owned the bloodstained collar of Abraham Lincoln. He was. This is weird, but he helped found like children urology, which is weird, like urology for children. He was also an expert on the Nuremberg trials, I believe it was, for the N word, right? Not the other N word, but the N word with our boy Adolf. That
The Yahtzees.
he was also one of the first people that wasn't part of the government to to study the autopsy of JFK. So he was obsessed with the JFK assassination as well. So again,
I don't believe for a second that he was not government. If he was at the Nuremberg trials and analyzing JFK, this dude was MK Ultra to the max.
anyways, the member, Bonaparte's member is in his family. He's already passed on long ago, but his member is a part of the. You can look this up. I'm spreading awareness for it, and point being that they take these parts of people throughout history who were powerful. Bonaparte was like talking to demons and the devil and all this stuff. Descartes was kind of sort of doing this mystical thing. In my opinion, I think he was still part of a secret society or was hanging around with people in a secret society. I think he was interested in the occult to a certain extent, and we know that he didn't publish certain things he was writing about. So who's to say that there isn't still even more stuff that's been lost or burned or something that related to Descartes and math in itself, the way that he was studying it, you can get deep enough in math where it is spiritual, where it is mystical. And, that's what John Dee and the Pythagoreans and all these other guys were doing at their time. So where the hell is the skull? The actual skull, if it's not that one that is at the museum now.
I wonder if that guy was a prankster. Like if you fall asleep early at one of his parties, you wake up and you got Napoleon's dick in your mouth, and everyone's like laughing at you.
Everyone's like, "Damn, you gay, bro? You gay? You got Bonaparte's thing on your lip." Oh man.
So so in this book it mentions this one is hard for me to believe or understand, but it says that that Descartes' skull is reputed to be in the Museum of Man in Paris, and it now serves as a generic display about the development of a human skull. For example, they've got this big glass enclosed presentation, and it says it's got a skull marked as Cro-Magnon, and it says 100,000 years. Then it has one that says age 40,000 years, a skull of an early French peasant, and then it says 7,000 years. And with another skull, and then it says you Homo sapiens, age 0 to 120. But they're saying that skull that's in this presentation is just like, here's what a human skull looks like. That might be Descartes' skull, which sounds crazy to me that it wouldn't literally be like its own exhibit, right? Like, here is the skull of Descartes, this great philosopher, but instead it's just like, here's what a human skull looks like.
No, so read that again, bro. Read that part again to where it says here. It says.
Okay, so it says they're talking about the French philosopher now serves as part.
No, right here. Below, which caption reads, "You, Homo sapiens sapiens." So he's like, "You, Homo sapiens sapiens."
Well, it's a video camera that's pointed at you. So when you read it, it says, "This is you, Homo." Yeah, right.
You Homo. I thought that was funny.
You would.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then here. Yeah, Descartes, this is all of the things that he left behind, right? Everything that the guy has owned, the land, and he was like swashbuckling with pirates, and he was like rizzing up these princesses and these queens. Here's everything that he left to the world. An embarrassing letter of apology to Voidus, a painful reminder of the debacle that helped push him out of Holland. And this is this guy that claimed that they were like sharing information, and just to squelch this, Descartes writes an apology letter to him just because he doesn't want to have to leave the country. He doesn't want to like die over it. So he writes this, but he does it begrudgingly. He doesn't agree with the apology. He doesn't want to apologize. He does it for political reasons. And that never leaves his mind. Like, he's just perturbed by the fact that he had to write this fake apology for the rest of his life, that it's even included in his last possessions. 9 volumes of copies of letters Descartes had written against Voidus, copies of Descartes' responses to objections that were sent to him by academic opponents in Holland, and then finally copies of letters that Descartes had written to his dearest friend, Princess Elizabeth, the one that didn't kill him with the inside job. But I wanted to just note here that aside from the love letters that he kept with him to death, everything else that he kept in his possession were just things that reminded him of how much he hated everybody else. Like this guy like brought his hate to the grave with him, right? Hate and some love letters. It wasn't like astrolabes, it wasn't like discoveries on platonic solids. He kept that all in his head, but in the physical realm, what he cared about the most were these battle raps against all of his enemies and all of like the damning stuff that he said to them, including copies of the things that he had written. So I don't know.
In true Descartes fashion.
Yeah, even if you're the smartest dude on literally the smartest dude on the planet, that does not absolve you from being a hater until the day that you die.
Exactly.
We're getting pretty close here. So then after he dies, it gets into the whole premise of Leibniz, who finds this secret notebook. What's it? Leibniz.
Leibniz. Gottfried Leibniz. Yeah.
Put some respect on his name.
Exactly. Thank you.
Leibniz, he is this ultimate code breaker and
ultimate fanboy too. He lived for Descartes.
Kind of. Well, he lived for him, but he also disagreed with him, but he couldn't keep his name out of his mouth. He'd be like, man, this Descartes got it all wrong. Man, I love Descartes. He was so smart. No, he wasn't. He got it all wrong. But man, what a genius he was.
I would have stroked him off.
And again, this is that theme, right? The 3 rules of being a successful philosopher: be rich, sleep late, teach yourself. So even this code breaker says, when his teachers found out that he was learning Latin outside the classroom and had already mastered the language while the other students were still struggling, the teachers became upset and told his mother that they should prevent the boy from reading books above his level. So again, man, teachers are absolutely evil. If like these teachers would have ruined Descartes, they would have ruined the code breaker. We wouldn't have gotten any of this knowledge, all because of teachers. And it makes me think of the teachers the same way as that doctor, where the patient's like telling the doctor, you're wrong. Nope, that's wrong too. Nope, that's wrong. And eventually the doctor's like, okay, I'm going to kill you now. Like how wrong is that going to be?
Yeah, that guy,
teachers are the same thing. Like, oh, you want to learn Latin and you're getting good at it? We're taking that book away from you.
Yeah, that guy's super dead. No, you're gonna be good, bro. You're gonna be fine. We're gonna pull through this. Yeah, he's dead as
let's see. And then it gets into he finds in Descartes' possessions these letters that said GFRC, Germania FRC, meaning Fraternitas Rosea Crucis, or Fraternity of the Rose Cross, or Frater Christian Rosenkreuz. However you want to encode these letters, they all lead to this Society of the Invisibles, which was also the Alchemical Society of Nuremberg. Funny how Nuremberg comes up again. And that the contents of this lost notebook, De Solidorum Elementis, was revealed only after researchers made the decisive discovery that was found 3 centuries earlier. And this is the secret of the entire handbook, is you've got all of this writing. And there was also a note here. I don't want to get too much in depth, but that Descartes had written these letters in a certain cipher, that the only way you could differentiate a letter from a number was how thick the stroke was. Like, this is kind of crazy to even be able to pick up on this, to be like, oh, that D over there has a little bit extra ink on the edge of it, so that means it's actually the number 4. This is some really deep sort of like cryptology. And then you can even see on this letter in Descartes' handwriting, these are those numbers: 4, 6, 8, 12, 20, and then 4, 8, 6, 20, 12. The only difference is being the 12 and the 20 get basically swapped. And it says that as soon as he saw those numbers, he turns the page, and on the back of it were Platonic solids that were written out. And he immediately didn't have to read any of the rest of this book. He knew exactly what those numbers meant. And the numbers were that the 6 was that a cube has 6 faces. And if you go in order of the Platonic solids, right? You start with the cube, then you go to a pyramid, then you go to an octahedron. So the cube has 6 faces. The pyramid has 6 edges. The octahedron has 6 vertices. And they start going down this rabbit hole of like, oh my God, was Descartes trying to find 666 everywhere too?
Illuminati confirmed.
Illuminati confirmed. they're trying to find the hidden 666 code. But there was more to it than that. He turns the page one more time and he sees more platonic solids. So in order, the tetrahedron, which is a pyramid with triangular faces, then a cube with square faces, then an octahedron with triangular faces, then a dodecahedron with pentagonal faces, and then finally the icosahedron with triangular faces. And that if you were to take the faces and the vertices and the lines of all these different shapes, these are those numbers that he was referring to. And what he did, and there's even a chart here, what he was doing was he was correlating the different numbers of the faces and the vertices and the lines and showing that there was a direct relation to them removed by this number 2. There was a constant in here. And this is the whole secret of the notebook, was that once you compare all the platonic solids, the number of faces and lines and vertices between each shape goes up by adding the previous 2 numbers and then just adding the number 2. And that this works for every single platonic solid, even shapes that weren't listed in antiquity. This would be this constant formula that you could apply to everything everywhere. And this is apparently what Descartes thought was so revolutionary that he had to keep it secret, that this was going to get him killed, because here's this graphic where if you start with the platonic solids, you can encapsulate each one of those in a sphere. And every time you do that, you can take that platonic solid, put it in a sphere, then wrap the next platonic solid inside of that, put that one in a sphere, and just keep going outward. And that if you were to look down at this from like a 2-dimensional plane, that those vertices of each platonic solid represented the position of astral bodies traveling around, and that this is what, in his mind, proved of a heliocentric universe, that this only worked in this way, that you would stack platonic solids on top of each other to plot out the position of planets traveling around the sun. And he had to keep this secret because the Inquisition would kill him for it. I don't know if they would have been able to like put these numbers together and been like, oh my god, he's proven it. But in his mind, it was obvious to anyone that would have just looked at it.
Yeah, but again, he was so far ahead of his time and so far ahead of the ancients that it wasn't that, because something, right, it seems very simple. Like a lot of ideas seem so simple until it's not your idea anymore and somebody else did it. Like Uber, I could have thought of that. I could have made an app and created this network of cars and charge people a fee to use other people's cars. Like, that's so simple. Why'd you do it? And
hack into their phones and make it so that they can't use other services. That was also part of Uber's plan. I don't know if you ever saw the show. I think it was Jared Leto was in it. Was it Jared Leto? But it was about Uber and talks about all that.
Interesting. I'm trying to find the quote where it's like, some things just need to be kept secret. I'm trying to find it here.
Here's the chart. So if you care about the actual math of this might get you killed by the Inquisition if you're not careful. So if you take these different platonic solids, tetrahedron, cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron, and you list out the number of faces, vertices, and edges, basically, like for example, if you add the 4 faces and the 4 vertices of a tetrahedron, it has 6 edges. Well, 4 plus 4 equals 8, minus 2 is where you get 6. Then you've got a cube, 6 faces, 8 vertices. You add those 2 numbers together, you get 14, and to get the number of edges, you just subtract 2. So now you could theoretically figure out an infinite number of platonic solids and know exactly how many faces, vertices, and edges they had, because you always just add the faces and the vertices and subtract 2 to get the edges. And this was revolutionary. And I guess that no one actually found this formula represented by F plus V, face plus vertice, minus E equals 2. So faces plus vertices minus edges is always going to equal 2. This wasn't rediscovered for another 300 years, apparently. And this is the secret. The whole secret notebook of Rene Descartes, this was the thing that he was hiding from the rest of the world, was this constant of 2.
Selfish.
And I got, after learning this, again, it's one of those Uber, like, oh yeah, just you make an app and people deliver stuff. How hard is that? Everyone knows that. I saw this and it's like, yeah, you add the faces and the vertices and you find out there's this constant number of 2. What's the big secret? Why would you have to hide this for hundreds of years and encode it in all these like cryptic poems and diagrams? But again, we weren't living at that time, so
Well,
I don't get what the big secret was.
it does seem very simple, right? Hindsight's 2020, but also, what if there's something deeper than just this?
Well, it's hindsight's 2020 minus 2, actually.
Well, yeah, exactly, -2. But again, what if they're encoding something even deeper than that? And mind you, that's what Leibniz picked up on. We're talking about guys that are so deep into the cryptography and the encoding. Who's to say that Leibniz is not lying about this?
This was such a fun thing to read too. So Leibniz remained in contact with Descartes' friends and followers. The most prominent Cartesian philosopher of the late 17th and early 18th centuries was a guy named Nicolas Malebranche. I'm probably butchering that. Malebranche first read Descartes' philosophy in a manuscript published in 1664. And get this, upon reading Descartes' ideas, he became so excited that he suffered from palpitations of the heart
He
and had to
jizzed
be
in his
confined
pants.
to bed rest. Yeah, bro. Imagine coming across a math book and like it gets you so hot and bothered. You're like, I got to go on bed rest for a couple of days. This math is like really
Just blew
getting
my
to
load,
me.
dude. Nice.
I wish I cared about philosophy or math as much as this guy did. And then yeah, this was the other thing that I just couldn't get my head around, is that even today,
Yeah.
how much time like Newton and Leibniz, that they discussed not the mathematical principles, but who stole the idea from who, like where did they get this from, instead of like, wow, that's crazy, that does represent an objective reality of the universe we live in. Someone else is like, who cares about all that, who came up with that idea? This is also kind of like you can relate in like podcasting world or in any sort of creative space where it's like, yeah, it's cool that you did this thing that applies some objective truth to reality, but you didn't come up with that, I came up with that.
Yeah, Isaac was like, whoa. So
Here's my last note. This is the last highlight that I got in this. It says, one new model of geometry of the universe is thus a gigantic octahedron that folds into itself in every direction. It's an octahedron in which opposite faces are identified with each other. This means that if a spaceship travels outward from the inside of an octahedron towards one of the faces and it passes through that face, it will arrive speeding back inward into the octahedron from exactly the opposite face of the octahedron. They're literally talking about portals here, right? This is like a rift in time space in which it's like you walk through your front door, and right as you pass through your front door, you're now headed back inside the front door even faster.
yeah, but again, this is why I'm icosahedron Earth now, because it's both a sphere and flat. It's round and flat, so it's observably flat because it's got its flat sides, but it's also round, so that accounts for 24-hour sun and all that stuff. And it's a model that makes a lot more sense to me, and it plays right into this whole Descartes thing of the universe being this endless geometric formation. How you're saying when you go into the vertices, right, the vortexes and all this stuff, it would make sense that you'd come out on the other side. So that was your last note there, but I want to pull up my last note because I thought this was hilarious. They literally end the book with this. So we have reluctantly, Leibniz returned to Hanover at the end of the summer of 1676 and spent the remaining years of his life serving the Duke of Hanover in various posts. He was an educator, diplomat, counselor, and librarian. He traveled much to Vienna, Berlin, and Italy. His final task was to write the history of the Brunswick family whom he served. When he died in 1716, that history had still not been completed. Leibniz never married. In his eulogy of Leibniz, Bernard de Fontenelle recounted that when Leibniz was 50 years old, he proposed to a lady, but that she took so much time to consider his offer that he finally withdrew it. When he died, the only heir to his considerable fortune was his sister's son, so his nephew. When this nephew's wife heard how much money she and her husband had inherited, she suffered a shock and died. They literally end the book with that, bro. Like, that's the end of the actual story itself. But yeah, this dude had, and I tried to look up how much money Leibniz left behind, but there's like nothing on it. But it was enough to, again, this is very crazy. Like, this, idea is like, well, that's wild. But again, it's part of the story. And so I think Leibniz is the father of calculus or something or other, something like that, and binary code and stuff. So he's really tied into like computers and all this. He was going around Europe as well, collecting stories of transmutation, alchemical transmutation. So he was super deep into alchemy as well. There's a lot of facets of his life, and he was obsessed with Descartes. But
he kind of advanced beyond some of what Descartes' thinking was, because not only the father of some types of like calculus, but non-Euclidean geometry.
Yeah.
So that same mind state that Descartes grew up in, which was that every single shape and calculation can be determined by straight lines and circles and arcs. The non-Euclidean version of this is that, well, actually there's also like weird little squiggly lines and parabolic curves, and all of these things are inherent in geometry. They're not just side effects of measurements that ironically you couldn't even know existed before the Cartesian coordinate system was there to plot them out and define them, but that all these other shapes that aren't just circles and lines are also making up the rest of reality. And that was I think one of those big additions that calculus gave us. And I've got one other, not a note from this book, but here I've got one other image to show here. And this kind of blew my mind a little bit, because in the book, they're kind of showing you, if you ever seen an animation of a hypercube in space, it kind of shows like this fifth dimensional object as it intersects with 3-dimension or 4-dimension intersecting with 3rd-dimension. It looks like a cube that keeps turning itself inside out over and over for infinity. And that's what they're kind of alluding to in this book, is that it's not just this constant of 2 in these platonic solids, but that there's an infinite number of these all nested in each other, like one of these Russian nesting dolls, and that this represents the true nature of reality. And wouldn't you know it, man, that this rumor that Pythagoras killed one of his students, you remember this one?
He drowned him?
That he drowned him or threw him overboard, or one of the theories was that the guy wouldn't shut up about the square root of 2, which is an irrational number, and Pythagoras was not down with irrational numbers. But there's another theory about Pythagoras drowning this guy, and it was because the guy revealed the shape of the dodecahedron, which is basically this shape right here, which is exactly the shape that they're describing in this Russian nesting doll of reality. That if you understand the secrets of this dodecahedron, saying that you can travel through one face and come out the other side of it, kind of breaking everything we know about time space, that this is like the ultimate secret of reality. If this was worth Pythagoras killing his own students over, and this is one of those shapes that was encoded by Descartes in a secret notebook, he wouldn't dare spell this out for you. You would have to understand this for yourself by knowing the faces, the vertices, and the edges. So what you were implying before, maybe it's not just about this formula with edges always being, 2 less than adding the faces and the vertices. Maybe
put it all together.
It's about this dodecahedron and the secrets that this thing encapsulates. And I actually know the secrets of the dodecahedron, but I don't want to get killed, so I'm not going to share them here.
Okay, good call, dude. Good call. But so what'd you think, bro? You mentioned a little bit earlier of like how you like the storytelling in this book, and that's what kept me like also, glued to it. I this is the second time I read it through, and there's still things I'm picking up on. But what'd you think of the book? Like, did you think it?
I loved it, man. This would go on my recommended reading list to anyone, even if you don't care about Descartes. It's legitimately an interesting read, and it's got everything, right? It's got war and romance and secret societies and
murder,
mysticism
mystery,
and alchemy and 666 gematria and shipwrecks and swashbuckling with pirates. Like, it literally, if you like Count of Monte Cristo, this book reads like the Count of Monte Cristo.
Never read that, but
That's a shame.
I had actually thought about reaching out to the author when I had first stumbled across this book to have him on to talk about it, but he's dead. He died in like 2000 something, like early 2000s. But yeah, he's again super interesting. I forgot how I stumbled across this book, but when I picked it, I was again Secret Notebook of Descartes. I think I was like researching Descartes deeply, and I wanted to read it, and it covers the biography part of his life, and then some more of the interesting chunks and bits of his life, which where's his skull? Was he murdered? And then you pair that up with the voyage to Cartesius, and you go, now it all makes sense. I figured out the secrets of reality. So
Dude, that's honestly fascinating to think about. How many people have read this Secret Notebook of Rene Descartes? Now, out of that subset of people, how many of them have also read the Voyage to Cartesius and have been able to connect all those different dots? It seems like a very small minority of people. So if there is anyone that read one or the other, reading both of them will give you so much extra context on all of this. Like I don't know if I'd be able to appreciate this book as much, or vice versa. Like as I'm reading this one, it's making me want to go back and revisit Voyage to Cartesius. Like I would understand even more of it now.
No, yeah. So definitely read this book before you read A Voyage to Cartesius, because that's how it came to me. Because I forgot, was it you're the one that told me about A Voyage to the World of Cartesius after I had already read this particular book. So definitely read this book and then read A World to Cartesius, and it's gonna like a puzzle. It's just gonna come together. But given the fact that your and I's the only video that exists on YouTube about the world to A Voyage to the World of Cartesius is ours, plus the only video about this book that exists on YouTube is going to be ours as well. The chances of people reading both, either at the same time, whatever, is very slim, because we are literally the only ones on YouTube that I was able to find, at least, that are talking about these topics. So we're doing an important job. We're not being selfish like Descartes, and even though this is never going to go out ever, but just keep in mind that we're not being selfish like Descartes by holding everything in and not sharing our seed with you. Hypothetically speaking, from a Eorbach perspective, we're giving you our knowledge, and you're suckling on the member to extract that knowledge. So
you're suckling on our teats of knowledge.
The Secret Notebook of Descartes. There's nothing.
I want to throw this out there too, in case there are any princesses or queens that are in need of mentors. Juan and I are available, although know that I taught Juan everything that he knows. Juan's not available, so
don't reach out to me. Don't email me.
Best and only option.
Don't even comment on this. I don't care. And apparently Leonardo da Vinci also had a secret notebook. We might have to visit that, see what he was all on about. Leonardo da Vinci and his secret notebook.
I guess I need to tack on here too that the secret notebook part of this was the letdown. Like it didn't blow my mind once you find out what was in the secret notebook. It was the rest of the biography that was really interesting to me, and just the fact that how this guy had to break this code, and that he had to break it almost in real time. He didn't even get to bring the book home with him. He had someone looking over his shoulder that was like, what are you doing? Why are you reading that? Why are you writing that down?
Not that part.
And
not
he
that
was
part.
able to do all this.
Yeah, not that part. Skip that page, because there was also there was missing parts of it. It's like, what was he doing? Was he being told not to do that? So again, some knowledge is meant to be kept secret.
Bro, but what it said that he only read like a small portion of that. He only read like a few pages out of all the pages that were in this notebook. And he claimed that once he saw the Platonic solids and once he saw those numbers, he immediately knew what he was looking for, and he didn't need to read the rest of it. How do you know, bro? What if that was just like the intro, and the last 2/3 of that book were dropping some serious knowledge?
Guess we'll never know, Thomas. Guess we'll never
know.
Well,
I will, but I'm not going to divulge those.
There you go. Make sure to follow my new YouTube channel. I am permanently demonetized on the main channel, so follow me at the Juan on Juan Media, so youtube.com/@TJOJP. Follow me on there. That's where I'll be going live and posting. Patreon.com/the Juan on Juan Podcast. We have feeds for the Occult Book Club. Link in the description if you want to listen to just the Occult Book Club episodes. And plug your stuff, Thomas. www.tjojp.com. Find all my stuff on there. And yeah, dude.
Don't forget to support our sponsors, Horror Babylon, the Jesuit College, and the Rosicrucians. Just send them all your money. Links below. You can also directly support them by directly supporting me at paranoidamerican.com. You can buy comics and games and toys and all sorts of things that will advance your knowledge far beyond any teachers. And if you were born rich, hit me up. Hit me up and we can discover the secrets of the universe together. We're both going to sleep in late and teach ourselves things.
Except they got to pay you to be able to sleep in late and teach yourself things because you're not rich. So, yeah, make sure to check that out, guys. And we'll catch you on the next one. We don't know what we're going to do next, but we'll figure it out. You guys are never going to hear this, so it doesn't matter. But we'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye now.